He demanded the hospital's top surgeon, certain it would be some battle-worn legend with a man's voice and a resume thick as armor. But when the OR doors sighed open, General Logan Rourke froze like he'd just walked back into an ambush. Because the woman walking toward him wasn't just a doctor. She was the one he buried in his mind 15 years ago, the one the Army declared dead. If you've ever felt your life hinge on a single phone call, a single door opening, you know this fear. Fluorescent lights, antiseptic air, the steady beep that sounds like a countdown. Rourke can't move his neck without lightning tearing down his spine, and someone wants this surgery to end quietly. Stay to the end and you'll see how truth power and survival collide when a scalpel becomes evidence. Drop your city in the comments, and if you're locked in, hit like. The beep did not care who he was. It kept its rhythm in the clean white air, steady as rain on glass, while General Logan Rourke sat rigid beneath fluorescent light and tried to pretend his body was still a machine that answered to willpower. Lone Star Surgical Institute rose over downtown Austin like a private fortress. Marble floors, soft lighting, hushed voices. The lobby smelled faintly of citrus and money. A wall of framed donor plaques caught the light like medals, each name polished and permanent as if generosity could buy immortality. Rourke walked through it with two aides and a quiet security detail that wore civilian clothing but moved like a unit. Heads turned. People did not stare for long. They looked away, the way civilians looked away from helicopters and funeral processions, aware of power, unsure of their place near it. He kept his chin level. He kept his shoulders square. Every step sent a thread of pain up his spine, thin at first, then thickening into a hot wire that hissed behind his eyes. 3 months of it. 3 months of waking in the dark, swallowing down the urge to groan, gripping the edge of his nightstand, until the room stopped spinning. He had told himself it was manageable like any injury. Manageable until the mornings when his left arm went numb for a full minute and he had to flex his fingers in the shower like he was counting them. In the executive clinic suite, Dr. Philip Weller waited with a folder held like an offering. Weller was in his late 40s, a physician by training, turned administrator by necessity. His suit fit too tightly around his neck. Sweat lived at his hairline. He smiled the way people smiled at generals, as if warmth could soften authority. General Rourke Weller said, stepping forward, "Thank you for trusting us. We have assembled our top team." Rourke did not shake his hand. Not out of rudeness, out of calculation. He looked at Weller's throat, the pulse there, the way fear made skin shiny. He looked at the room, the exits, the corners. A habit born overseas. A habit that never left. "Bring me the best surgeon you have," Rourke said. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. Not the best resume. Not the best fundraiser. The best hands. Weller nodded too quickly. "Of course. Our head of neurosurgery, Dr. Alan Banford, has published 12 papers on cervical microresection. He trained at Hopkins. He has performed over 1,000 spinal cases." Rourke finally looked at the folder. It was thick, glossy, impressive in the way brochures were impressive. He took it from Weller with 2 fingers and flipped it open. Photos of Banford smiling beside conference banners. Banford in scrubs, Banford in a lab coat, Banford shaking hands with men in suits. It looked like a campaign. Rourke turned a page and his mouth tightened. "Banford," he said, tasting the name like it might be spoiled. Weller's smile held. "Yes, sir. He is the finest in Texas. We have him on standby." Rourke closed the folder. The sound was soft, but it landed like a gavel. "No." Weller blinked. "I'm sorry." Rourke slid the folder back across the table. I reviewed his file. Weller's eyebrows jumped. "That is protected information." Rourke's eyes stayed flat. "I have protected information." Weller swallowed. "General Dr. Banford has an excellent record. He is meticulous. He is respected nationwide. He is human," Rourke said. "And under pressure, his hands get noisy." Weller hesitated. The kind of hesitation that meant the administrator understood exactly what Rourke was referencing and wished he didn't. Rourke leaned forward just slightly. The movement sent a lightning bolt down his left shoulder and into his forearm. His jaw clenched, but his face did not change. He had learned how to compartmentalize pain the way other men learned to compartmentalize guilt. Senator Caldwell's surgery, he said. 2 years ago, Dura Nick. Small, they said. Manageable, they said. The report got sealed. The family got a settlement. The surgeon got a standing ovation at the next fundraiser. Weller's mouth opened, then shut. The room was suddenly too small. That report, Weller said carefully, is not available to the public. I am not the public, Rourke replied. Weller shifted his weight. His hands now empty kept trying to find a place to rest. He touched the edge of the table, then pulled back as if even furniture might bite him. General Weller began with respect. Dr. Banford is more than capable of removing a foreign body from the cervical region. It is a delicate approach. It requires a surgeon who says, I don't need delicate, Rourke said. I need steady. Weller tried again, voice thinning. Sir, spinal surgery at C4 is among the highest risk procedures we perform. You want the most experienced neurosurgeon available. Rourke's eyes narrowed. Experience is not the same as nerve. Weller's shoulders dipped, defeated for a breath. Then he rallied because people like Weller lived in a world where pleasing powerful men was the same as survival. We are prepared to schedule you immediately, Weller said. We have a private suite. We have a full security arrangement. We have everything you need. Rourke stood. The room swayed for a fraction of a second. He planted his feet and let the dizziness pass like a wave receding. His aides watched without moving, trained not to interfere unless asked. I have a piece of metal migrating toward my spinal cord, Rourke said. I have a fragment sitting close enough to my life that I can feel it when I swallow. If it moves another millimeter, I lose function. If it moves more, I lose breath. I am not dying in a room full of plaques and polite smiles. Weller's face went pale. Rourke took a breath through his nose. The air tasted like disinfectant. I want the surgeon your staff calls when the case is too ugly for donor tours, he said. The one who does not care who I am. The one who operates like time is an enemy. Weller's eyes flickered toward the window. Outside Austin's skyline blurred behind rain streetlights smeared gold against wet pavement. The administrator looked like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, deciding whether to jump or be pushed. There is, Weller said quietly, one other option. Rourke waited. Weller's voice dropped further as if the walls were listening. Chief of Trauma, Dr. Mara Quinn. The name hit the air and did not register on Rourke's face. It sounded ordinary, harmless. Rourke had known men with ordinary names who could dismantle a room with their eyes. He did not trust softness. Is she a neurosurgeon? He asked. She is not, Weller admitted, but she is the best operator we have. She has done spine access in emergency settings. She has steadier hands than anyone in this facility. She rarely accepts elective cases. Why, Rourke asked. Weller exhaled. Because she does not like being managed. Rourke's mouth twitched, the closest thing to humor he had shown all day. Good, he said. I am not here to manage. I am here to live. Weller glanced at his watch. She is in surgery right now. How long? Rourke asked. 14 hours, Weller said. She came on for a multi-car collision at dawn and has not sat down since. Rourke buttoned his suit jacket. The motion sent a sharp sting behind his collarbone. He ignored it. Tell her, he said, that this is not a request. Weller flinched. Sir, she does not respond well to pressure. Rourke stepped closer, and Weller's instinct was to lean back as if the general's proximity could bruise him. Then tell her, Rourke said, that the pressure is inside my neck. Weller nodded quickly. Yes, General. As Weller left the suite, Rourke walked to the mirror above the sink. He loosened his collar. The skin at the base of his neck was irritated, a faint swelling under the scar tissue. He stared at his reflection, and for a moment he saw the man beneath the rank. 56 years old, silver creeping at the temples, fine lines cut by weather and war. His eyes were still hard, but the hard had shifted. It had become something tight and tired. He touched the scar gently. The sensation was wrong, not pain exactly, more like the memory of pain, a phantom that refused to fade. He had told Weller he wanted the best. He had not told him the truth, the quiet truth he kept from everyone. He was afraid, not of death. Death was simple. Death was a clean end to a mission. He had seen it 100 times. He had written letters, stood on tarmacs, saluted flag-draped coffins until his shoulder burned. What he could not stomach was the chair, the helplessness, the idea of being fully awake, fully aware while his body became an object other people moved. The mirror showed him a man who had carried whole wars on his shoulders. And now a piece of metal smaller than a fingernail threatened to turn him into something he could not command. In another wing of the hospital, the air did not smell like money. It smelled like blood and sterile gauze and burnt tissue. It smelled like survival. Operating room 3 was bright enough to make shadows sharp. Dr. Mara Quinn stood over a man whose chest had been opened like a door that refused to stay shut. A car crash victim, early 40s, too much speed and not enough luck. His descending aorta had torn. The kind of injury that did not wait for paperwork. The kind of injury that turned minutes into funerals. Mara's hands moved with a measured urgency, not frantic, not slow. She did not waste motion. She did not speak unless the words mattered. Suction, she said. A resident doctor, Ethan Park, leaned in, eyes wide above his mask. He handed her the tube without fumbling. Mara's gaze flicked to the monitor. Pressure still unstable, blood loss heavy. Clamp, she said. The scrub nurse placed the instrument into Mara's palm. Mara did not look at the nurse. She did not need to. The OR had learned her rhythm. They moved around her the way a team moved around a breacher. Hold, Mara said, and Ethan held his gloved hands steady, even as sweat collected at his eyebrows. Mara's needle flashed. Stitch, pull, tie. The vessel closed like a wound, learning how to behave. Ethan let out a breath he did not know he was holding. He whispered, then caught himself. You just saved him. Mara did not look up. We are not done, she said. Watch his outputs. If his pressure drops below 90, page me. Yes, doctor. Do not text. Mara, added voice sharp enough to cut through the hum of ventilation. Page. Yes, doctor. Only when the patient was stabilized, only when anesthesia confirmed a controlled transfer to ICU did Mara step back. She stripped her gloves off with a snap and tossed them into the bin. Blood had dried at the cuff of her sleeve. She rolled her neck once. A small pop, satisfying and ugly. Her eyes were green, startling against her pale skin. The kind of green that looked out of place in a hospital, like something wild got trapped indoors. Fine lines lived at the corners, earned by 2 decades under harsh lights and worse news. Her hair was hidden under a dark scrub cap printed with small sharks, a private joke that no one had ever heard her explain. Ethan followed her toward the scrub sink, still glowing with adrenaline. I have never seen anyone suture that fast, he said. Mara washed her hands without turning. Soap water friction. Ritual. Clean away the evidence. Speed is not the goal, she said. Control is. Ethan nodded quickly. Yes, doctor. Mara shut off the water. She peeled down her mask. Her face was calm, but her eyes had the distant look of someone who had been awake for too long. Get some food, she told Ethan. You are shaking. I'm fine, he lied. Mara looked at him. The glance was brief, but absolute. Ethan swallowed. Yes, doctor. She left the OR and walked down the hall toward the break room. Her feet felt heavy. 14 hours of standing turned bones into dull instruments. Her stomach was hollow. Her head pulsed behind her eyes. She wanted 10 minutes of silence and stale coffee, and the kind of numbness that came from sitting still. She did not get it. Dr. Philip Weller intercepted her near the swinging doors. His tie loosened, his face flushed. Dr. Quinn, he said, breathless. Mara did not stop walking. Philip, she said without warmth. If this is about the committee meeting, she continued, I am not attending. I have an ICU patient who needs monitoring. It is not the committee, Weller said, keeping pace. It is a patient. Mara slowed finally. Her eyes narrowed. If you say VIP, I will keep walking. Weller hesitated. Then he nodded once, resigned. It is a VIP. Mara turned her head just enough to pin him with her stare. I do not do VIPs. We need you, Weller said. You have Banford, Mara replied. He loves senators. He loves cameras. He loves being thanked by people who have never held pressure on a bleeding artery. Weller's mouth tightened. Banford was refused. Mara paused. That was new. Refused, she repeated. The patient rejected him, Weller said. Specifically, Mara's expression did not change, but something in her eyes sharpened. Who is the patient, she asked. Weller glanced down the hallway as if checking for eavesdroppers, then leaned closer. General Logan Rourke, he said. 4-star, former Special Operations Commander. He is in our executive suite. The corridor seemed to stretch. The hospital sounds softened. The beeps from distant monitors became a low wave. Mara's fingers curled slightly at her sides, the way hands curled when they wanted to hold on to something. Logan Rourke. The name landed inside her like a stone dropped into still water ripples, spreading fast, shaking things that had been settled for years. For a moment, she saw sand. She smelled fuel. She heard rotor blades. She heard her own voice raw from screaming into a radio that returned nothing but static. She forced the image down. She forced her breathing to remain even. Weller watched her face and saw something slip. Mara, he said, quieter now. You went pale. Do you know him? She blinked once, twice. Then she raised the steel shutters behind her eyes and let them lock. No, she said. The lie came out smooth. Practice was a kind of muscle memory. Weller did not look convinced, but he was too desperate to interrogate. He has a cervical foreign body, he said. C4, possibly C5. It is unstable. He needs removal. Send me the scans, Mara said immediately, voice flat professional. We have them ready, Weller said. But there is an issue. Mara kept walking. Weller stayed beside her, almost jogging now. What issue, she asked. He refused sedation for the pre-op prep, Weller said. He insists on meeting the surgeon before any block. Mara's jaw tightened. Of course he did. Men like Rourke did not like being unconscious. They did not like surrendering their bodies to strangers. They especially did not like surrendering their bodies to women, even brilliant ones, even the ones they claimed to respect. Tell him he is not in a war room, Mara said. Tell him he is in my hospital. Weller's voice cracked. He does not respond well to being told. Mara stopped abruptly and Weller nearly collided with her. You brought me into this because he does not respond well to being told, Mara said. That is not my problem. That is the problem you are paying me to solve. Weller exhaled, hands raised in surrender. He demanded the best. Mara stared at him for a long beat. Flattery will not move my hands, she said. It is not flattery, Weller replied. It is a fact. Mara resumed walking faster, now headed toward the imaging station. Weller followed. He is in pain, he added, as if that would soften her. Mara's voice stayed cold. Everyone is in pain. At the imaging station, Mara pulled up the scans. The screen lit her face in harsh gray. Her eyes moved quickly, cataloging angles, distances, risks. A jagged fragment sat too close, a sliver of death waiting for a shift in posture. A voice inside her, one she did not invite, whispered that Logan Rourke had always been too stubborn to die. She pushed the thought away. Her finger traced the outline of the fragment on the screen. Posterior approach, she murmured. High risk. Weller hovered behind her shoulder. Can you do it? Mara turned her head slightly. If I could not, I would already be walking away. Weller swallowed. He has resources. He has influence. Mara's eyes narrowed again. Influence does not stabilize a spinal cord. Weller nodded quickly. I understand. Mara stared at the scan a moment longer. Then she straightened. Prep him for a spinal block, she said. I do not want him awake for the incision. He will refuse, Weller said. Mara's gaze cut to him. Then you can explain to him that refusal is a luxury. Luxury disappears when a fragment is millimeters from paralysis. Weller lifted his hands. He wants to see you first. Mara's mouth flattened. Fine, she said. Bring him to pre-op. Keep the area clear. No press, no donors, no unnecessary staff. Weller nodded. Yes. Mara grabbed a tablet and a clean chart. She walked toward the scrub room to change into fresh scrubs, her feet moving on autopilot, her mind somewhere else entirely. A nurse passed her and smiled. Long day, Dr. Quinn. Mara gave a brief nod, not unkind, not warm. In the scrub room, she stripped off the blood-stained gown and pulled on a fresh set. She tied the strings with practiced hands. She pulled a cap over her hair. She tied on a mask. The fabric covered her mouth, but it did not cover what her eyes were doing. She was trying not to remember. She was trying not to hear the way his voice used to sound in a quiet tent, when everything outside was gunfire and sand. She was trying not to feel the weight of his hand on her shoulder the night before the mission, when he promised something that felt real enough to build a future on. She was trying not to see the helicopter banking away. She washed her hands and looked at herself in the mirror. A surgeon stared back. A woman who had learned how to bleed privately. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. A message from ICU about the car crash patient. Pressure stable. Output improving. She exhaled, one small piece of control. Weller appeared in the doorway again as if he had been chased. "He is asking where you are," he said. Mara did not look up. "Tell him I am preparing to save his life." "He wants to know your credentials," Weller said, and he sounded embarrassed repeating it. Mara's eyes lifted. "Tell him my credentials are the people who walked out of my OR when they should have died." Weller hesitated. He is not unreasonable. He searched for the word accustomed. Mara finished tying her gown. She stepped toward the door and Weller moved aside quickly. "Accustomed to obedience," she said. "That is not what he is buying from me." Weller nodded flustered. "Understood." They walked through the surgical wing toward the executive pre-op bays. The corridor changed as they moved. Less noise, softer lights, carpet instead of tile. The smell shifted from blood and cautery to citrus cleaner and expensive hand lotion. This wing was designed to make the wealthy feel safe, even when their bodies were failing. Mara hated it. She passed a framed photo of a donor, smiling beside a ribbon cutting. She passed a water feature that made a gentle sound like a lie. She passed a nurse station where staff spoke in whispers. Weller stopped at a door labeled Pre-Op 7. Two security officers stood nearby, not hospital security. Federal posture, earpieces. Their eyes flicked to Mara and held for a fraction too long. Her skin prickled. Weller whispered his detail. Mara nodded, once expression unreadable. Inside the room, the lights were low. The monitor beeped softly. A man sat on the edge of the bed with his back to the door, shoulders broad, even through pain. He wore a white hospital shirt untied at the back, but the posture was pure command. Weller cleared his throat. "General Rourke." The man did not turn immediately. He finished buttoning the cuffs of his civilian shirt, hands steady, jaw tight, as if pain had teeth. When he turned, Mara saw the face she had tried to bury. Older now. Harder. A scar she did not recognize cut down one cheek like a knife mark from another life. His hair was silver at the temples, but the eyes were the same. Cold gray, focused, built for decisions that cost lives. He looked at her and saw Scrub's mask cap. He saw a professional stance. He did not see the war yet. "Dr. Quinn," he said, voice low, controlled. "I am told you are the only one here who can cut straight." Mara stepped in, keeping distance, keeping it clinical. She held the chart like armor. "I have reviewed your imaging," she said. "The fragment is precarious. We will need a posterior approach. It is high risk." "I know the risks," Rourke said. His gaze did not leave her eyes. "Take off the mask." Mara's breath caught behind the fabric. She kept her voice steady. "That is against protocol in a sterile prep area. We are not in surgery," Rourke said. "And I want to see the face of the person holding a blade to my spine." Weller's hands lifted slightly. "General, we can do introductions after sedation. It is safer to maintain." Rourke glanced at Weller, and Weller stopped speaking as if the air had been removed. Mara's fingers tightened on the chart. She could refuse. She could walk out. She could hand the case to Banford and let the hospital deal with the consequences. But she had never run from a disaster. Not when bodies were bleeding. Not when lives hung on her hands. Not when fear tried to direct her. She reached up slowly, untied the top string, then the bottom. The mask fell away. For a heartbeat, the room was silent, except for the monitor. Rourke's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. A crack formed in his composure, small but catastrophic. He stared at the scar on her chin. He stared at her eyes. Color drained from his face. His mouth opened, but no sound came. He looked like a man who had survived everything except this. Mara, he whispered. The name came out like a prayer swallowed halfway. You died. Mara did not flinch. She stared back at him, her eyes steady, her voice calm enough to be cruel. Hello, Captain, she said. Weller's head snapped toward her. He did not understand the word, the rank, the way it carried history. Rourke's hands gripped the edge of the bed rail. His knuckles whitened. His body trembled once, not from fear of surgery, but from the kind of shock that made the past feel alive. I saw the report, he said, voice breaking around the edges. I saw the helicopter burn. There were no survivors. Mara's mouth curved into something that was not a smile. A report, she repeated. That is what you saw. The monitor beeped. Beep, beep, beep. The sound filled the space between them. Weller took a half step back instinctively, as if he had wandered into a room where something dangerous had woken up. Mara turned her head slightly toward the scan light board, forcing her hands to remain surgeon steady, even as her pulse hammered behind her ribs. The fragment in your neck is still there, she said, and it is still moving. If you want to live, you will lie back and let us prep you. Rourke stared at her as if his mind could not decide whether she was real. His throat moved with a hard swallow. Then he nodded once rigidly, the only concession he could give without losing himself. Mara stepped toward the door, reaching for the handle as if leaving the room was the only way to keep her breathing even. Her fingers hovered there for a moment longer than necessary, and she felt the thin edge of memory press against her spine like a shard. She opened the door and looked out into the quiet hall, then back at him, her voice controlled, professional, and sharp enough to cut through the haze. Get him ready, she said to Weller. Now. Mara did not let herself run. She walked down the corridor at the same pace she used when a trauma pager went off, fast enough to matter, controlled enough not to invite questions. The executive wing's carpet muted her footsteps, but her pulse still felt loud in her ears. Behind her, Weller was already talking into his phone, voice hushed and brittle, calling anesthesia, calling nursing, calling whoever he believed could turn chaos back into protocol. At the nurse station, 2 staff members glanced up, then looked away. Not because Mara was intimidating on a normal day, but because something in her face said this was not a normal day. Her eyes stayed forward. She could feel the general behind her, even without looking like a heat source in the room she had just left. She pushed through a door marked staff only and entered a small supply alcove that smelled of alcohol wipes and latex. The fluorescent lights were harsher here, honest. Shelves lined the walls with sealed packs, sterile kits, syringes, rolls of gauze. It was the kind of place that did not care about titles. Everything was labeled stacked, ready to be used and discarded. Mara placed the chart on a metal counter and rested her palms on either side of it. The cold steel grounded her. For a few seconds, she let her breathing settle, slow in, slow out. The same pattern she used in the operating room when the field turned red and the room wanted to panic. 15 years is a long time to practice being dead. She closed her eyes and saw Wardak again, not as a memory, but as a sensory punch. Dust in the teeth. Rotor wash whipping sand into skin. The taste of fuel. The hard metallic click of a radio that only returned static. She heard the distant thump of gunfire in her mind, and beneath it, the heavier sound that had stayed with her the longest, the sound of a helicopter banking away. Her hand drifted to the scar on her chin. The skin there was smooth now, but her fingers remembered what it felt like to bleed under canvas and moonlight, to press gauze against her own face, and keep moving anyway. She opened her eyes before the image could deepen. A knock sounded on the doorframe. Mara did not flinch, but her shoulders tightened. Weller stepped in as if he had been granted a temporary pass into enemy territory. Behind him was a woman in navy scrubs, hair tucked under a cap, an ID badge clipped to her collar. Dr. Quinn, the woman said, voice crisp. I'm Dr. Nina Delgado. Anesthesia. Mara nodded once. He refuses sedation. Delgado's eyebrows rose. He can refuse certain things. He cannot refuse physics. Weller tried to smile at that, failed, and rubbed a hand over his mouth. He wants to remain in control, he said as if apologizing. Delgado looked from Weller to Mara. Control is an illusion in a preoperative bay. Mara picked up the chart and flipped it open again, more for something to do than for information. The scans were already in her head. She could map the fragment's position with her eyes closed. She could see the spinal cord like a bright line, fragile and absolute, and the shard like a hooked sliver hovering too close. How long has the pain been escalating? Delgado asked. 3 months, Mara said. But the last week has changes. Numbness. Weakness. That tells me the fragment is shifting. Delgado's face tightened. Then he is not negotiating. He is borrowing time. Weller swallowed. He also has his own security detail. Delgado gave him a look that did not bother hiding contempt. This is a hospital, not a base. Weller's shoulders hunched. Try telling him that. Mara closed the chart. We are not fighting him, she said. We are working around him. Delgado nodded, already shifting into the tactical calm that good anesthesiologists wore like armor. I can give him a spinal block with minimal sedation. Enough to keep him from moving, not enough to make him feel like he is losing consciousness. If he insists on meeting you fully awake, we do it. Then I do my work. Mara stared at Delgado for a beat, seeing competence and blunt reality, and felt a small flare of relief. She did not trust people easily. She trusted skill. Bring the block tray, Mara said. Set up in the bay. Quiet. No audience. Weller's phone buzzed. He glanced down, then looked up, eyes wide. He's asking where you are again. Mara's mouth flattened. Then we return. They stepped back into the executive corridor. The air here had been curated. The lighting was softer. The walls were decorated with calming art landscapes that made pain look like a weekend problem. Mara hated those paintings more than she could explain. She had seen landscapes where people died. As they approached preoperative Bay 7, the 2 men in suits outside the door straightened. One placed a hand against his earpiece. Their eyes moved over Mara, not like hospital staff checking an ID badge, but like trained men cataloging threats. Mara met their gaze without slowing. They did not stop her. Inside, the room felt smaller than before. Rourke sat on the bed now, in a gown the ties untied. He had his civilian shirt folded neatly on a chair, as if even clothing deserved order. His hands were on his thighs, fingers relaxed. The posture looked calm. His eyes were not. Weller hovered near the door, careful not to step too far in, as if the general might detonate. Delgado remained by the wall, watching the monitor, assessing. Rourke looked at Mara as she entered. His face was controlled, but there was something raw beneath it now, an edge that had not been there when he was simply a patient demanding the best. He was seeing a ghost and trying to force reality to obey him. You called me captain, he said. Mara did not move closer. She set the chart on a rolling stand. That is what you were when you left. Rourke's jaw tightened. I did not leave you. Mara's eyes stayed steady. You flew away. Weller's throat worked. He looked as if he wished he could evaporate. Rourke's voice lowered. You are alive. Mara let the statement hang. Alive was a complicated word. Alive meant breath and heartbeat. It did not mean safe. It did not mean whole. Your scan, she said, keeping her voice clinical, shows a fragment near your spinal cord at C4. We need to remove it. Rourke's gaze did not flicker. And you are the one doing it. Mara did not answer immediately. The part of her that still belonged to Wardak wanted to say no, wanted to walk away, and leave him with the consequences of his choices. The part of her that had built a life out of trauma wards knew what walking away looked like from the other side. It looked like a body that could have lived. Yes, she said finally. I am doing it. Rourke's shoulders lowered a fraction, a relief he could not fully show. Then his eyes hardened again. I want to talk before you put me under, he said. Delgado stepped forward, voice calm. General, you need a block. Your blood pressure is already elevated. Stress will worsen that. Rourke did not look at her. I did not ask you. Delgado's expression did not change. She turned slightly toward Mara. His blood pressure is 180/100. Weller winced as if numbers were weapons. Mara took a slow breath. We will block you, she said to Rourke. Minimal sedation. Enough for safety. You will not move. You will not feel the incision. Rourke's gaze narrowed. I will not be unconscious. You do not get to be fully awake, Mara replied. Her voice was quiet. That is not control. That is risk. You do not risk my hands. Rourke's lips pressed into a thin line. You always spoke like that. Mara's eyes flicked once, quick as a blade. And you always thought your rank was a key. Rourke leaned forward slightly, then stopped as pain sparked behind his collarbone. His face tightened for a heartbeat, then smoothed again. He did not make a sound. Mara saw it anyway. She always saw pain. You were declared dead, he said. There was a report. There was a letter. I wrote to your family. Mara's mouth curved into that same sharp, almost smile. You wrote a letter. Rourke flinched actual movement this time. I did what I was told. I did what I thought was right. Mara stepped closer by one measured pace. Not close enough to touch, close enough to make the air between them feel occupied. While you were writing letters, she said, each word controlled. I was dragging a medic through a ravine with a fractured leg. I was drinking dirty water out of a rock hole because the canteen was gone. I was listening to men walk past my hiding place and praying they did not hear breathing. Weller stared at her. Delgado's gaze sharpened. The room shifted as if the hospital itself had leaned in. Rourke's face drained of color again. Mara, he said, and there was something in his voice that sounded like grief. I saw the helicopter. I saw it burn. Mara's eyes did not soften. You saw fire. You assumed it was the end. You moved on. I did not move on. Rourke snapped, then lowered his voice as if catching himself. I never moved on. Mara's throat tightened, but she did not let it show. She had learned long ago that softness could be used against you. Delgado cleared her throat, professional. Dr. Quinn, we need to proceed. We are within a critical window. Mara nodded once without turning. Prep the block. Weller exhaled a shaky breath, grateful for something to do besides stand near history. Delgado began setting up drawing curtains, slightly pulling the rolling block tray closer. A nurse entered quietly, placing supplies with practiced motions. The room became a battlefield of preparation, controlled and sharp. Rourke watched Mara, eyes tracking her, as if memorizing her face, as if it might vanish again. You stayed in medicine, he said. Mara did not answer at first. She checked the monitor, she checked the chart. She checked her own hands, flexing fingers inside sterile gloves. I stayed in what I could control, she said finally. Rourke's voice went lower. Where have you been? Mara's eyes flicked to Weller, then back. That question is not part of your consent form. Rourke almost smiled. Almost. You always hated paperwork. Mara's gaze hardened. You always underestimated paperwork. Delgado approached Rourke with the calm authority of someone who could turn pain into silence. General, I need you to roll onto your side. Rourke hesitated. His hands tightened on his thighs. Mara stepped closer again. Do it, she said. The command landed differently from anyone else's. Rourke's eyes met hers. Something in him yielded. He turned onto his side with careful movement, breath catching as pain knifed. Mara watched his shoulder blade shift, saw the old musculature still there beneath the weight of years. She did not let herself focus on his body as something familiar. It was a body that might not move again if they failed. Delgado cleaned his lower back and draped sterile towels. You will feel pressure, she said. Do not move. Rourke's voice was tight. I have been shot. I have been burned. I have been awake during stitches. I do not need warning. Delgado's mouth did not change. You will receive it anyway. Mara stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed the way she stood during intubations and chest tubes. Present. Watching. Ready to intervene. Rourke looked at her from the corner of his eye. Are you going to stay? Mara's voice was flat. Until your spinal cord is safe. Delgado inserted the needle. Rourke's jaw clenched a tiny exhale through his nose. He did not make a sound. The monitor showed his pressure spike anyway. Delgado gave medication. Breathe, she said. Slow. Rourke's eyes closed for a beat, then opened again. He looked at Mara like he could not stop himself. Mara, he said, voice rougher now, I did not leave you on purpose. Mara's chest tightened. She remembered the way he used to say her name in the dark, softer than war. She forced her voice to remain surgical. Purpose is not the point. Outcome is. Rourke's lips parted, then shut. He swallowed. The medication began to work. His lower body relaxed. The rigid edge in his shoulders softened by degrees. Not unconsciousness, not surrender, just the unavoidable truth that the body had its own rules. Delgado checked sensation-tested response. Block is setting, she said quietly to Mara. Mara nodded. Her eyes stayed on Rourke's face. Weller finally spoke timid. Dr. Quinn, do you need anything else? Mara did not look at him. Clear the hall. Only essential staff. No one with a badge they do not need. Weller nodded too fast. Yes. Yes, of course. He moved toward the door, eager to flee, but Rourke's voice stopped him. Weller, Rourke said. Weller froze, hand on the door handle. You will not speak about this. Rourke continued, eyes locked on Mara. Not to the board, not to donors, not to anyone. Weller's mouth worked. General patient privacy is guaranteed, but I must report certain events including. Mara cut in. There is no event to repeat. There is a surgery. Weller looked at Mara, then at Rourke, and nodded, terrified and relieved in equal measure. He left and pulled the door closed softly. The room quieted. Delgado finished her checks. The nurse adjusted the IV line. The monitor beeped steady. The air hummed with ventilation. Rourke's eyes never left Mara. You are really here, he said. Mara stared at him, and for the first time since she stepped into the bay, she let herself feel anger as something other than fuel. It rose in her throat, bitter and sharp. I was always here, she said. You were the one who stopped looking. Rourke's face tightened. That is not fair. Mara's voice lowered. Fair died in the sand. Rourke's eyes flickered with pain that was not physical. Tell me what happened. Mara held his gaze. She could have told him everything. She could have poured 15 years into his lap and watched him choke on it. She could have described the cave, the days without water, the medic's shallow breathing, the sound of boots on gravel outside her hiding place. Instead, she glanced at the monitor again. What happened, she said, is you have a foreign body near your cord. And I am not losing you on this table because you want to settle history. Rourke's throat moved. He looked away for the first time, gaze settling on the ceiling tiles. I never remarried, he said quietly. Mara's jaw tightened. She did not respond. I never had kids, he continued, because it felt like betrayal. Mara's eyes narrowed, a flash of something like disbelief. You think grief makes you honorable. Rourke's head turned slightly. I think grief made me hollow. Mara's voice stayed sharp. Hollow men still get promotions. Rourke's mouth tightened. You think I wanted any of it? Mara stepped closer, stopping beside the bed, close enough now that she could see the faint tremor in his eyelid, the subtle strain around his mouth from holding pain in. I think she said that you survived. That is what soldiers do. They survive. And the people left behind learn to do it without them. Rourke's voice dropped to a near whisper. I was the one who left. Mara's hand clenched into a fist at her side. She forced it open again. Delgado cleared her throat softly. Dr. Quinn, we should transfer to the operating room. Mara nodded. She leaned in slightly toward Rourke, voice cold enough to be a boundary. Listen to me, she said. Once we cross that threshold, you do not speak. You do not ask questions. You do not tell my team how to do their jobs. You will be still. You will be a patient. Do you understand? Rourke's eyes met hers. His pride flared for a moment, then faded under the weight of necessity. Yes, he said. Mara held his gaze a moment longer, searching for signs of manipulation, for the old instinct that power could bend reality. She found something else instead. Fear. Not the kind of fear that made people scream, the kind that made them quiet and obedient. Good, she said. The nurse lowered the side rail. Delgado signaled to transport. Within moments, staff entered with practiced efficiency. They lifted lines, secured monitors, adjusted the gurney. Rourke's security detail appeared in the doorway again, watching like men guarding an asset. Mara stepped into the hall as the gurney rolled out. The executive wing seemed too quiet for what was happening inside her chest. The carpet muffled everything, but it could not muffle memory. As they moved toward the surgical suite, Ethan Park appeared near the scrub, Sinks, eyes widening when he recognized Mara's posture, the tightness in her shoulders that meant something had gotten under her skin. "Dr. Quinn," he said softly, "you are taking a case in OR1. Mara nodded once. Ethan glanced toward the gurney as it passed. The patient's face was partially turned jaw set, eyes half-lidded. Ethan's expression shifted from curiosity to recognition. He swallowed. "That is," Ethan began. "Yes," Mara said, not slowing. "It is." Ethan fell into step beside her for a moment. "Do you want me on your team?" Mara looked at him. His eyes were steady. He was young, but he had seen enough blood to know when to stop pretending the world was neat. "You will do exactly what I say," Mara replied. "Yes," Dr. Ethan said quickly. "And you will not speak unless you have something useful," Mara added. Ethan nodded again. "Yes, doctor." Delgado walked on Mara's other side. Gaze forward, voice low. "Your heart rate is up." Mara did not look at her. "So is his." Delgado's tone remained even. "This is personal." Mara's eyes stayed forward. "This is surgery." Delgado did not argue. She did not need to. The monitors would tell their own story. They reached the double doors that separated the surgical wing from the operating rooms. Beyond it, the air became colder, stripped of comfort. The smell changed. More iodine, more sterile plastic, less perfume. A circulating nurse checked the chart, then looked up at Mara. "Dr. Quinn, we are ready for you." Mara stepped to the sink to scrub elbows, high fingers methodical. Water ran hot over her skin. Soap foamed. She scrubbed as if cleanliness could erase history. Ethan scrubbed beside her, silent eyes down, following her rhythm. Across the hall, Rourke lay on the gurney, surrounded by blue drapes and equipment, eyes open, watching the ceiling as if memorizing it. His hands were still, but his fingers occasionally flexed, a soldier's habit, checking that he still owned his body. Mara finished scrubbing and let the nurse gown her. Gloves snapped into place. Her hands rose, held in front of her chest, palms facing inward, the posture of someone about to take control of a room. Delgado approached Rourke, voice calm. "General, I am going to give you medication through your IV. You will feel heavy. Your breathing may slow. That is normal." Rourke's eyes shifted to Mara. "I want her to do it," he said. Delgado looked at Mara, then back at him. "She operates. I manage the airway." Rourke's jaw tightened. "I want her to stay where I can see her." Mara stepped closer to the gurney, stopping beside his head. She looked down at him. The lighting here was unforgiving. It showed fatigue, age scars. It showed truth. "You have my attention," Mara said. "Now you will give me yours. Lie still." Rourke held her gaze. "If this goes wrong," he said quietly, "I do not want strangers making decisions for me." Mara's voice stayed flat. "Then do not make it harder." Rourke's breath hitched a small wince in his throat. "Mara," he said softer, "I am sorry." The words hung there bare and awkward, like a man trying to speak a language he had not used in years. Mara's eyes did not soften. "Save your breath," she said. "You need it." Delgado administered the medication. Rourke's eyelids grew heavier. His gaze still clung to Mara for a moment, as if his mind refused to let her disappear again. Then his focus drifted not into sleep, but into the fog of anesthesia that made the edges of the world less sharp. The transport team rolled him forward. The operating room doors opened, releasing a wash of cold blue light. Machines hummed, monitors beeped. Steel instruments lay arranged in precise order, reflecting the overhead glare like rows of teeth. Mara followed the gurney in hands, raised eyes narrowed with concentration. The room did not ask who she used to be. It only demanded what she could do now. The operating room swallowed them whole. Cold blue light washed over stainless steel. The ventilation system hummed with a steady authority that made every other sound feel like an intrusion. Monitors blinked and spoke in clean, indifferent numbers. A surgical tray sat draped in sterile cloth instruments aligned with a precision that looked almost religious. Logan Rourke lay face down as the team positioned him. His head was secured, his shoulders squared, his body draped in blue sheets that turned him from a man into a field. Only a small square of skin at the base of his neck remained exposed, painted amber with iodine the color of warning. Mara stood at the head of the table for a moment, gloved hands raised, breathing slow through her nose. She listened to the room the way she used to listen to the desert at night. Tiny changes, tiny threats. Dr. Nina Delgado checked the airway and the lines her voice steady and low. Vitals are stable. Blood pressure is still elevated, but coming down. Ethan Park hovered on the opposite side, eyes fixed on Mara's hands. He did not speak. The OR had taught him the cost of noise. The circulating nurse read the time without looking up. Incision time, 1946. Mara extended her hand. Scalpel. Metal touched her palm. The familiar weight settled into place like an old promise. She lowered the blade to the skin. A thin line of red appeared clean and controlled. The room narrowed. Outside the drapes, the world did not exist. Inside them, there was only anatomy and time. Bovie, she said. The cautery pen hissed as it touched tissue. A faint smell rose sharp and specific. Burnt protein. The smell that lived in every operating room, the smell she had trained herself to ignore. Her fingers paused for a fraction of a second. The scent punched through her discipline and opened a door she kept bolted. Heat and dust, rubber and fuel, copper blood. For one breath, she was not in Austin. She was back under canvas and rotor wash, back in a world that tasted like sand and adrenaline. The sky was bruised with smoke. A helicopter lay on its side like a dead animal, rotors twisted metal, screaming as it cooled. Someone was yelling, a voice hoarse and desperate, and she realized the voice was hers. Dust off, grid reference please, she heard herself say, and the radio answered with static that felt like laughter. She blinked hard. The OR snapped back into focus, but the flash of memory left a residue. Her grip tightened on the cautery pen. Mara Delgado said softly, not a warning, just a touchstone. Mara forced her hands to move again. Retractor, she said, voice clipped. Ethan placed the instrument carefully, his eyes searching her face above her mask. He saw nothing there that he could name. He saw only a surgeon. Mara dissected through muscle with mechanical calm, layer by layer, exposing the spine. The way you expose truth, slowly, deliberately, without allowing emotion to rush ahead of precision. She kept her breathing steady. She kept the past behind her teeth. Delgado's voice floated from the head of the bed. End title is good. He is holding. Mara did not answer. She did not need to. Her world was narrowing toward bone. Lamina in view, Ethan murmured, finally speaking, because it mattered. Mara leaned in. White bone glowed under the surgical lights, smooth and unforgiving. Microscope, she said. The bulky microscope rolled into place with a soft whir. Mara stepped to the eyepieces and looked through. The field magnified until reality felt unreal. Tiny vessels pulsed like living threads. Nerves looked like pale cords that carried everything a person was. Just millimeters away sat the foreign body, a hooked sliver embedded close enough to catastrophe that Mara felt anger tighten in her throat. Not at him, not at herself, at fate, at the way war refused to stop taking even in a quiet hospital in Texas. She focused harder, making her vision a point. Drill, she said. The drill's vibration traveled up her wrist, an intimate buzz. She worked with measured pressure, carving a window with the patience of someone opening a safe. The room stayed silent except for equipment, the soft whir, the monitor's steady beep, the suction's quiet pull. 2 hours passed like a held breath. Sweat gathered at Mara's hairline beneath her cap, a slow burn. Her shoulders ached from holding still. Her fingers never shook. Ethan's eyes flicked between the microscope and Mara's posture, learning what calm looked like under pressure. Delgado watched the monitors, her face composed, her hands ready. Mara teased scar tissue away from the shard, slowly, delicately, like separating two things that had fused by accident and time. The fragment resisted. Tissue clung to it as if trying to keep it where it was. Interface, Mara murmured, voice low. Ethan leaned in slightly. Suction ready. Do not touch the cord. Mara said the words sharp enough to cut through fear. Ethan nodded once. His hands remained steady. Mara adjusted her forceps. She gripped the shard. For a moment, she held the general's life between two small tips of metal. His ability to stand, his ability to breathe, his future. All of it balanced on her control. She rocked the shard gently, not pulling yet, feeling for the give. It moved. Mara's chest tightened. Coming out, she said more to the room than to herself. The fragment slid free with a wet reluctance, like something being extracted from the body of a lie. It dropped into the metal basin with a clean clang. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Mara exhaled a long, slow release that she did not allow to become relief. Motor potentials, she said. A neurologist at the corner of the room, monitoring nerve signals, looked up. Signals strong. No change. Delgado's eyes flicked to the monitor. Stable. Ethan's shoulders loosened slightly, then tightened again when he realized the procedure was not over until Mara said it was. Mara stepped back from the microscope and looked down at the metal in the basin. Under the bright lights, the shard did not look like ordinary shrapnel. It was not rusted. It was not pitted. It was clean, almost too clean, the surface catching light in a way that made it look expensive. Her gaze narrowed. She leaned closer. Even without touching it, she saw an edge that did not look like jagged impact. It looked smooth in places, fused as if the metal had been softened by extreme heat and then hardened again. A partial serial stamp glimmered on one side, faint but real. Mara's stomach tightened. She did not say anything yet. She did not want the room to hear her thoughts. Close, she said instead. Ethan blinked. Close, doctor. Close, Mara repeated, voice steady. Layered. Clean. No drama. The OR moved again back into the rhythm of finishing. Mara closed with the same discipline she opened, with careful sutures, controlled pressure, no wasted motion. When the final dressing was secured, the circulating nurse announced the time. Closure. Complete. 22:12. Mara stripped off her gloves slowly, as if the act required thought. She turned to the nurse. I want that foreign body labeled and sent for pathology, Mara said. Flag it for my personal retrieval. Do not discard it. The nurse nodded quickly. Yes, doctor. Ethan watched Mara's face. There was something there now, a tightness that did not belong to surgery. Delgado stepped closer, voice low. You saw something. Mara kept her eyes on the patient's draped form. I saw metal that does not match the story. Delgado's gaze sharpened. Do you want me to document? Not yet, Mara said. Not here. Delgado did not argue. She understood rooms that listened. Transport arrived. Rourke was moved carefully, lines secured, monitors attached. The gurney rolled out toward recovery, the team following. Mara walked behind them, her hands empty now, but she felt the weight of that shard in her mind, like it was still in her palm. The fluorescent lights in the corridor seemed harsher after the OR. She could smell the faint burn of cautery still clinging to her skin. At the doors to recovery, Weller appeared like a man who had been holding his breath for hours. His face brightened when he saw Mara. How did it go? He whispered. Mara did not slow. He will walk. Weller's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank God. Mara glanced at him. Do not thank God. Thank the monitors. Thank the team. Thank physics for holding. Weller swallowed, of course. Mara followed the gurney into the recovery unit. The post-anesthesia care bay was dim lights lowered the air warmer than the OR, thick with the quiet labor of waking bodies. Curtains created small, private worlds. Monitors beeped softly in a dozen different rhythms. Nurses moved like ghosts, efficient and calm. Rourke's eyelids fluttered. His breathing was slow, supported by medication, then gradually more his own. His first conscious sensation was absence. The screaming frequency that had lived at the base of his neck was gone. In its place, a dull ache, a heavy fog, pain that felt contained rather than predatory. His lashes moved again. A nurse leaned in. General Rourke, can you hear me? His throat worked. Water, he rasped. A straw touched his lips. He drank greedily, then coughed once the movement pulling at the fresh incision. His face tightened. "Easy," the nurse said. "You have a drain and staples. Do not move." Rourke blinked harder, trying to clear the haze. He saw a shape in a chair beside his bed. A white coat, arms crossed. A stillness that did not belong to a nurse. Mara. Not in scrubs now, not hidden behind a mask. Her hair was pulled back tight, severe, practical. Her eyes were the only soft thing in her face, and they were not soft at all. Rourke's mouth opened. "Mara," he whispered, and the word came out wrong, fragile. Mara did not lean in. She did not smile. "You are awake," she said. "Do not sit up." He tried anyway out of habit, then stopped when pain flared and a firm hand pressed his shoulder back down. It was Mara's hand. Strong, certain, flat, she said. "Your neck is not a negotiable object." Rourke stared up at the ceiling tiles, breathing shallowly. He swallowed. "You did it," he said. "I did," Mara replied. 4 millimeters of titanium. You were lucky. Another week and you would not be speaking. "Thank you," he said, voice rough. Mara's eyes did not soften. "I did not do it for you." Rourke turned his head slightly, then stopped, remembering the warning. His eyes shifted toward her. "You did it because of your oath," he said. Mara's jaw tightened. "I did it because I do not let people die on my table if I can stop it." The words sounded like truth. They also sounded like restraint. Rourke breathed out slowly. "I did not think I would ever see you again." Mara stood up. She paced once within the small space, then stopped, hands on her hips, the posture of a person trying not to explode. "I did not plan to be seen," she said. Rourke's brows pulled together. "What does that mean?" Mara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a clear specimen bag. Inside it, the shard caught the dim light like a sliver of moon. Rourke squinted. "That came out of me." "It did," Mara said. Rourke's eyes tracked the metal. Even through anesthesia fog, the soldier in him started to wake. "It looks," he paused, searching clean. Mara held it closer to his face. "It is titanium alloy." Rourke's throat worked again. "From a helicopter." Mara's gaze sharpened. "From a helicopter that should have been blamed on the enemy." Rourke's eyelids widened slightly. "What are you saying?" Mara lowered her voice, glancing toward the curtain. Outside, nurses moved. Monitors beeped. The hospital lived its quiet life. Inside this bay, something else was breathing. "I am saying the edge is heat-fused," Mara murmured. "Not torn from impact alone." Rourke stared at her. "Fire can do that." Mara shook her head once. "Not the kind of fire you think." Rourke's eyes narrowed, mind working through old training. "You are talking about high heat." Mara nodded, high enough to change metal. He swallowed. His hand, weak, trembled slightly against the sheet, as if reaching for the memory of a weapon. "I told you the story," he said, voice low. "I told you we took fire, and we crashed." Mara's eyes held his. "Tell me again." Rourke stared at the ceiling for a moment, as if reading the lines in it. Then he spoke, and his voice sounded less like a general now, and more like a man, still trapped in a night 15 years old. "We took rocket fire," he said. "The pilot tried to climb out. We lost hydraulic pressure. I fought him for the controls. I tried to turn back." Mara's chest tightened. She said nothing. "We went down hard," Rourke continued. "I broke my back." That is where the fragment came from. Mara stopped pacing. She stood very still. "You broke your back." Rourke's eyes flicked toward her again. There was wetness there he would have denied if he could. "I woke up in Germany," he said. "A debrief officer told me there were no survivors at your position. Predator feed. Thermal signatures. Gone." Mara stared at him. The story fit in places. His injury. His pain. The fragment. It fit like a key that almost turned. "And you believed it," she said. "I did," Rourke replied, voice cracking at the edge. "I wrote to your parents." Mara's mouth tightened. The name of her parents felt like a pressure point she did not let anyone touch. "I spent months trying to get a search authorized." Rourke said, words coming faster now, as if he had been holding them back for 15 years. "They denied it. Too hot. Too risky. They told me you were vaporized." Mara's eyes narrowed. They. Rourke swallowed. Colonel Elias Mercer. The name landed in the bay like a weight. Mara did not react outwardly. Inside, something cold moved. Rourke stared at her. Mercer handled the report. He told me you were gone. Mara lifted the specimen bag again and held it up to the dim light. You crashed miles out, she said. Yes, Rourke replied. And the official story blamed an enemy rocket, Mara continued. Yes. Mara's voice lowered further. Titanium does not melt cleanly at ordinary crash temperatures. Not like this. Rourke's eyes sharpened focus, returning in a hard snap. You think it was intentional? Mara nodded once. Rourke's breathing changed. Not faster, just deeper. A man shifting from patient to threat assessment. What are you basing that on? He asked. Mara's gaze stayed fixed on his face. The edge, the fusion, the serial stamp. This is not random scrap. Rourke's jaw tightened. Mercer is Secretary of Defense now. Mara held his stare. Then he has had 15 years to make sure the truth stays buried. Rourke's face changed, anger pushing through the anesthesia fog, not loud, but lethal. He would not. Mara's eyes were flat. Men like that do not think in wood. They think in outcomes. Rourke's hand moved under the sheet, searching for hers without fully committing. His fingers brushed the fabric near her wrist. Mara did not pull away. She did not take his hand either. She left the distance there like a weapon. The shard, Rourke said, voice tight, has a serial. It does, Mara replied. Rourke stared at the ceiling again. If this is real, then my injury is evidence. Mara's voice was quiet. And my existence is a problem. Rourke turned his eyes back toward her, and the fear in them was not for himself. A soft rustle sounded outside the curtain. A shadow crossed the fabric. Mara's gaze flicked to the opening, her spine tightened. Weller's voice came from outside, too bright. General, how are you feeling? Mara's eyes narrowed. That tone was wrong. Too polite. Too rehearsed. The curtain swept back. Weller stood there with a nervous smile that did not reach his eyes. Behind him were two men in dark suits with earpieces. Their hair was short. Their posture was rigid. Their gaze did not belong in a hospital. One of them looked directly at the specimen bag in Mara's hand. Rourke's face hardened. Who are they? Weller's smile trembled. These gentlemen are from the Pentagon. They are here to assist with your transfer to Walter Reed. Standard protocol. Rourke's voice cut through the air. I am not going anywhere. The taller man stepped forward, voice smooth, controlled. General Rourke, this is not a request. Mara kept the bag in her hand without moving. She did not give them the satisfaction of flinching. The taller man's eyes stayed on the bag. Doctor, classified surgical debris must be surrendered for proper disposal. Rourke tried to sit up again. Pain slammed him back down. For the first time, he looked truly helpless, trapped in staples and medication. His jaw clenched, fury contained in muscle that could not act. Do not give it to him, he rasped. Mara did not answer. Her eyes were on the suited man. Name, Mara said quietly. The man hesitated for a fraction. Then he spoke like someone used to not being questioned. Agent Dalton Reeve. Mara tilted her head slightly. You brought weapons into a recovery unit. Reeve's mouth did not move, but his eyes flickered a small acknowledgement without admitting anything. Weller's voice broke. This is a hospital. Please. Reeve did not look at him. Hand over the bag. Doctor. Then this becomes a routine transfer. Mara's grip tightened around the plastic. Routine. Her mind moved fast the way it did when a trauma case turned into a mass casualty. She measured the room. Curtain. Door. Staff in the hallway. Nurses who would respond to any alarm. Cameras she could not see. A crash cart parked 2 bays down. Delgado somewhere nearby, likely already reading the situation in Mara's face. Reeve took a step closer. Last chance. Rourke's eyes locked onto Mara. He looked less like a general now and more like a man begging without allowing his voice to become a plea. Mara's fingers loosened slightly. She let her shoulders drop as if giving in. Fine, she said, voice shaking just enough to sell it. Take it. I do not want trouble. She extended the bag toward Reeve. Reeve's mouth curved in a faint, satisfied line. He reached for it. Mara stepped forward at the same time, closing the distance, moving like she belonged there, like she was simply handing something off. Her other hand dipped toward the crash cart at the edge of the bay, the kind kept stocked for emergencies. Her fingers wrapped around a preloaded syringe meant for airway crises, a medication designed for controlled paralysis during intubation, not for violence. She did not hesitate. She triggered the response she knew the hospital could not ignore. Code Blue, Mara shouted, voice sharp enough to pierce the entire unit. Code Blue Bay 7. She hit the wall alarm. The unit exploded into motion. Sirens blared. Blue lights flashed. Curtains fluttered. Nurses ran. A respiratory therapist appeared with a bag valve mask. Delgado came in, fast eyes scanning, already stepping into the role of command. Reeves' face changed as he realized the room had been seized by protocol. Mara moved in the confusion, purposeful, efficient. The suited man stumbled back a step as staff surged around him, blocking lines of sight. Someone bumped his shoulder hard. Move back, a nurse snapped. Give us room. Weller looked like he was about to faint. Mara's voice stayed loud, authoritative. He is not breathing. Bag him. Get an airway. Medical staff swarmed as if Reeve were a collapsing patient, because in a hospital, bodies on the floor had one meaning. They did not ask who deserved what. They acted. The second suited man tried to push through, hand drifting toward his jacket. A burly nurse shoved him back without looking. Back off. Now. The man's eyes flashed with anger. He did not draw. Not here. Not in front of cameras and staff and alarms. Rourke lay on the bed, eyes wide, watching Mara. Mara leaned toward him, voice low enough that only he could hear. Do not speak. Rourke's mouth twitched, half disbelief, half grim respect. Mara unlocked the gurney wheels with her foot. Delgado stepped in beside her, for a fraction gaze sharp. Mara. Delgado murmured, not a question, just presence. Mara did not look at her. Keep them busy. Delgado's eyes flicked to Reeve on the floor, surrounded by staff. You started a storm. Mara's voice was quiet. I know how storms move. She pushed the gurney backward through the curtain gap and into the service corridor, moving fast, but controlled. Rourke's body shifted slightly with the motion. He winced, then clenched his jaw. The corridor was narrow and smelled like bleach and linen. The hum of the hospital faded behind them, replaced by the distant echo of alarms. Rourke exhaled hard. You are, he began, then stopped as pain spiked. Mara pushed harder. Breathe. He managed a strained sound that might have been laughter if he had breath to spare. You are dangerous. Mara turned a corner without slowing. I am a trauma surgeon. They reached a freight elevator. Mara hit the button. The doors took too long. Her eyes scanned the hallway. Her ears tracked footsteps. The service corridor was empty, but emptiness in a building full of people felt suspicious. The elevator dinged open. Mara pushed the gurney inside and hit the basement button. Rourke's hand moved instinctively toward his neck, guarding the incision. Where are we going? He asked. Mara's voice stayed even. Not through the front. The elevator dropped. The air grew cooler. The lights flickered once. Mara did not blink. When the doors opened, the basement smelled like bleach and damp concrete. The loading dock area was a maze of carts, bins, and industrial doors. A laundry truck idled nearby, engine rumbling low. Mara scanned. A man with a clipboard stood by the truck, checking inventory. He looked up when he saw her. Doc, he called, surprised. This is not your floor. Mara forced her face into casual. She grabbed a stack of dirty linens from a nearby cart and tossed them over Rourke's body, covering his face and torso. The general disappeared beneath hospital sheets like a pile of supplies. Stan, Mara said, voice light, almost normal. Maintenance needs this cart sent out for deep cleaning. Infectious protocol. Stan's brow furrowed. He looked at the shape beneath the linens. That is a heavy load. It is, Mara replied. Do me a favor and toss it in the back. Stan hesitated. I need a signature. Mara reached into her pocket and pulled out her badge. You have it. Stan looked at her face for a moment. Something in her eyes made him stop asking questions. He lowered the lift gate. Mara pushed the gurney onto the platform. The metal vibrated under her hands as the gate rose. She stepped onto it beside the covered form, keeping her body between the gurney and the open dock. When the platform reached the truck level, Mara pushed the gurney inside. "I need to ride with you," she said, voice still casual. "Inventory issue. It will take 5 minutes." Stan frowned. "That is against the rules." Mara leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I will write you a note for that back pain you keep complaining about." Stan's mouth twitched, then he sighed like a man surrendering to the inevitable. "Fine. Get in." He climbed into the cab. Mara pulled the truck door closed behind her, then moved deeper into the cargo hold, away from any windows. The engine roared louder. The truck lurched forward. For a moment, the motion made Mara's stomach drop, the sensation too similar to a helicopter lifting off. She steadied herself by placing a hand on the wall. She pulled the linen away from Rourke's face. His skin was pale. Sweat beaded at his temple. His eyes were open sharp despite pain. "We are out," Mara whispered the words, sounding unreal. Rourke stared at her, then at the dim metal walls around them, the bags of soiled scrubs, the smell of detergent and stale fabric. He swallowed. That he rasped was not in the consent form. Mara sank to the floor beside him, back against the wall, letting the adrenaline drain in a slow, shaky wave. Her hands trembled now that the moment demanded nothing from them. Rourke's gaze stayed fixed on her, not hungry, not romantic. Something older, something like recognition. His hand moved slow, careful, and found hers in the dimness. His fingers wrapped around her knuckles with a gentleness that surprised her more than the violence did. Mara held still for a heartbeat. Then, without looking away, she squeezed back. The truck rolled through Austin streets, tires hissing on wet pavement. The city hummed outside, unaware lights smeared by rain music leaking from bars, people laughing under awnings. Inside the cargo hold, Mara listened to the engine and tried to keep her breathing steady. Rourke's voice came low. "They were going to take it." "Yes," Mara said. "They were going to take you," he added, eyes hard. Mara did not answer. She did not need to. Stan's voice drifted from the front through the thin wall. "Where am I dropping you, Doc?" Mara swallowed. Her mind was already moving through options like a map. "Second distribution center off Highway 30, she called back. "I will handle the rest." Stan hesitated, then agreed with a grunt. Rourke shifted slightly under the linen, a pained breath escaping him. Mara's hands moved automatically, checking his dressing through the fabric, checking the drain line. Everything felt stable for now. The truck rolled on, leaving the hospital behind, leaving the executive wing and its marble and its curated calm, leaving the alarms and suits and polished lies. Mara stared into the dimness of the cargo hold and held the evidence bag tight in her pocket, the shard pressing against her like a cold truth. When the truck finally slowed and turned onto a quieter road, the city noise thinning behind them, Mara closed her eyes for a single second. Not to rest, to listen, to feel if the past was still chasing them. "If you want me to continue," Part 4, from this exact moment, reply, "Continue writing from here." The laundry truck's diesel rumble became a kind of heartbeat, steady enough to think against. Mara kept her palm on Rourke's shoulder, through the linens feeling the rise and fall of his breath, measuring pain by the tightness around his eyes, whenever the truck hit a seam in the road. Austin slid away in wet streaks of light, then thinned into service roads and warehouse lots, where security lamps burned in cones and everything smelled like cardboard and oil. Stan backed the truck into a secondary distribution center with the casual confidence of someone who had driven this route for years. He killed the engine, and the sudden quiet made the metal walls ring. "You good, Doc?" Stan called. Mara forced her voice into normal. "I'm good. Thanks." Stan climbed down clipboard under his arm and walked toward the loading office. He did not look back. He had done her a favor, and favors in a working man's world survived by not asking what they cost. Mara waited until the office door closed before she moved. She slid the linens away from Rourke's face. His skin looked waxy in the dim cargo light, the kind of pale that came from anesthesia, blood loss, and sheer stubbornness. Sweat had dried along his temple. His eyes were open and alert, sharp in a way that did not match the weakness of his body. "You kept it," he rasped, nodding toward her coat pocket. Mara touched the pocket where the specimen bag pressed cold against her ribs. "Yes." Rourke swallowed. The movement pulled at his incision and he winced, then masked it instantly. Mara climbed down first and scanned the yard. A line of delivery vans sat behind a chain gate. A camera rotated slowly on a pole above the office. A motion light flickered near a side door. No people on the dock. No voices. Just wind pushing a fine mist across concrete. She turned back to Rourke. "Can you stand?" He did not answer right away. He breathed through his nose, testing the idea. "Not yet." Mara nodded. "Then you stay low." She rolled the gurney to the edge of the truck, eased it down the lift gate, and pushed it into the shadow between the building and a row of pallets wrapped in plastic. She pulled the linens higher, hiding his face again, hiding his body, turning him back into a shape that did not invite attention. Her eyes searched for the smallest opening. A van key hung on a peg just inside a side door with a faded sign that read, "Authorized staff only." Mara watched the door for a long beat. Nothing moved. She tried the handle. It opened. Inside was a narrow corridor that smelled of old coffee and dust, a wall of lockers, a clipboard on a hook, a vending machine humming like a tired animal. It was not a fortress. It was a place built on routine, and routine always left gaps. Mara moved through quickly quiet as a night shift nurse and returned with a set of keys and a reflective vest she did not put on. She did not need to look like she belonged. She needed to look like she was not worth noticing. The van's doors opened with a stiff groan. Mara backed it toward the truck bay, then killed the lights and rolled the gurney up to the rear. Rourke's eyes met hers through the linens. "This is theft," he said, voice low. Mara's mouth tightened. "This is triage." She climbed into the van, pulled the gurney in with a grunt, then secured it with straps meant for boxes, not bodies. She left the linens in place, covering him again. She shut the doors gently, then walked around to the driver's seat. Her hands were steady on the wheel. Her pulse was not. She drove out of the yard without looking at the office. She did not wave. She did not speed. A van moving at the speed limit drew less attention than a van trying to outrun something. When the warehouses fell behind them and the road opened into a darker stretch of highway, Mara exhaled for the first time since the operating room. Rourke's voice came from the back, muffled by fabric. "Where?" Mara glanced at the mirror, seeing only the dim outline of linens. "You said you had somewhere." Silence, then the sound of him shifting carefully. "There is a cabin," he said. "Hill country. Outside Yano." Mara kept her eyes on the road. "Whose?" An old friend, Rourke said. "Sergeant Major Hank Wallace. He died 2 years ago. No family, no smart meter, no internet. It is quiet." Quiet sounded like safety. Quiet also sounded like isolation, the kind that could swallow you if no one knew where you were. Mara turned onto a feeder road, then another, letting the city fade behind them like a fever breaking. The rain stopped. The sky cleared into a hard Texas night stars, sharp as shrapnel. She drove with the same focus she used in trauma scanning for tails, watching reflections in rearview glass, counting cars that stayed too close for too long. Twice, she slowed and let a pickup pass. Once she took an exit and re-entered the highway a mile later, not because she saw a threat, but because she refused to be predictable. The van's cabin smelled like cardboard and citrus cleaner. Her hands smelled like hospital soap and cautery smoke. After 40 minutes, Rourke's breathing changed shallower, tighter. Mara's eyes flicked to the mirror again. Pain. His voice was strained, just a spike. "Drain line," Mara said. Silence. Then Rourke's breath hitched. "I cannot reach it." Mara signaled and pulled off at a gas station that was mostly dark, one of those places that stayed open because the highway demanded it. She parked near the back under a light that buzzed and flickered and stepped out with her coat pulled tight. She opened the rear doors and climbed in. The linens shifted as she uncovered his face. Rourke's eyes were glassy. His skin was slick with sweat. He tried to speak, then swallowed hard. Mara's hands moved without hesitation. She checked the dressing through the gauze, checked the drain bulb, checked the tubing for kinks. Everything held. "Deep breaths," she said. Rourke's jaw clenched. "You always hated giving comfort." Mara tightened the tape and leaned back. "Comfort gets people killed." His eyes held hers, not always. Mara shut the doors and returned to the driver's seat. She started the van and pulled back onto the highway. They drove deeper into darkness. The road narrowed. The radio was off. The quiet inside the van became dense, full of things neither of them had said. After another hour, Mara took an exit toward the hill country. Trees thickened. Ranch fences appeared. The air smelled different out here, drier, sharper, cedar and dust. She followed Rourke's directions until pavement gave up and turned to gravel. The van's tires crunched and spit stones. The headlights swept across mesquite and tall grass across a deer that froze in the beam and then vanished into brush. A cabin appeared at the end of a narrow track, low and dark, built of weathered wood with a tin roof that caught moonlight in dull flashes. No porch light. No security camera. No neighbor's glow nearby. Just a shape against a field of stars. Mara killed the engine. The sudden silence felt like stepping underwater. She listened for a full minute. No approaching tires. No voices. Only insects and wind. She opened the back doors and uncovered Rourke's face. "We are here," she said. Rourke breathed out slowly as if the word "here" could become shelter. Mara climbed into the cargo space and positioned herself to move him. She had lifted heavier bodies in the emergency department, bodies, slick with blood bodies that fought against death. This was different. This body fought against vulnerability. "On three," she said. Rourke's lips twitched faintly. "You still give orders." Mara's eyes stayed hard. 1. She slid her arm behind his shoulders, careful of the incision, careful of the drain line. 2. Rourke's breath caught. 3. They moved together. Rourke's legs trembled when his feet hit the gravel. His hand reached for the van frame, then for her shoulder. Mara felt the weight of him through her bones, felt the way his body wanted to fold and his pride refused. She kept her grip locked and guided him toward the cabin door. The lock was old. The key stuck. Mara's fingers worked it free with a twist and a shove. The door opened with a groan that sounded like complaint. Inside the cabin smelled of pine resin and dust and old smoke. The air was cold. A couch sat against one wall, leather cracked, covered with a thin film of dust. A small kitchen with a sink and a wood stove. A table with 2 chairs. A rifle rack on the wall that was empty, now the wood still showing where the metal hooks had been. Mara did not comment on the emptiness. She walked Rourke to the couch and eased him down. He exhaled through clenched teeth. His hands gripped the cushion as if he was bracing for impact. Mara flicked on a lantern sitting on the counter. The light that spilled out was warm but weak, making shadows long and sharp. "Lie back," Mara said. Rourke tried to argue. Then his body betrayed him and he sank against the couch. His eyes closed for a second. When they opened, the soldier was there again, scanning the room, cataloging exits, assessing the cabin like an unfamiliar outpost. Mara moved to the kitchen and opened cabinets. A bottle of cheap vodka sat on a shelf like a forgotten friend. She found a first aid kit under the sink, old but stocked. She opened her coat pocket and pulled out the specimen bag. The shard glinted through plastic. Rourke watched her hands. "You took it." Mara's voice was flat. "I do not leave evidence in someone else's control." "You are certain it is evidence," Rourke said. Mara looked at him. "I am certain it is not what it should be." She set the specimen bag on the table, then filled a small bowl with vodka and grabbed gauze from the first aid kit. She returned to the couch. "I need to check your dressing," she said. Rourke's eyes narrowed slightly. "We are not in a hospital." Mara peeled back the tape anyway. The incision was angry and red staples marching in a neat line. The drain bulb was half full, the fluid dark. She cleaned gently, not tender, not harsh, efficient. Rourke hissed once. It was the only sound of pain he allowed himself. "It hurts," he said, voice rough. "It is supposed to," Mara replied. "You had a drill against bone." Rourke swallowed. "You kept your hands steady." Mara's fingers paused for a fraction, then continued. "That is my job." When she finished, she retaped the dressing with fresh gauze and checked the drain line again. Her hands had stopped trembling now. Work always steadied her. She sat back on her heels and studied his face in lantern light. The scar on his cheek looked deeper here. The lines around his mouth were carved by decisions and restraint. His eyes were still gray, still hard, but there was something raw behind them she had not seen in Wardak. "You should sleep," Mara said. Rourke's mouth tightened. "If I sleep, you disappear." Mara's gaze stayed steady. "I am not a hallucination." Rourke's throat moved. "I have had 15 years of believing you were a hallucination." Mara stood and walked to the table where the specimen bag lay. She picked it up and held it under the lantern. The shard caught light. The serial stamp was faint, but it was there, a partial line of numbers and letters. Rourke pushed himself upright, slightly wincing. "Let me see." Mara brought it close, then stopped just short of letting his fingers touch it. Rourke studied it, eyes narrowing. The fog of anesthesia had burned away. What remained was a man trained to read metal and damage and patterns. "That is aircraft grade," he murmured. "Yes," Mara said. And this he added, "Staring at the fused edge is not a clean shear from impact." Mara watched his face as he came to the same conclusion she had. She did not feel satisfaction. She felt cold. Rourke's eyes lifted. "Who told you about thermite?" Mara's mouth tightened. "I did not need someone to tell me. I saw the burn pattern. I have seen what controlled heat does to tissue and metal. This looks controlled." Rourke's jaw flexed. "Mercer." Mara held his gaze. "You said his name in recovery like it was Payson." Rourke's shoulders sank slightly, the weight of his own history pressing down. "Elias Mercer was the debrief officer," he said. "Back then, he was a colonel attached to intelligence. Now he sits in the office that decides what is classified and what is buried." Mara set the bag down gently. The plastic crinkled softly, a small sound that felt too loud in the cabin. "Why now?" she asked. Rourke stared into the lantern light as if it might answer. "Because I started pulling on a thread." Mara's eyes sharpened. "What thread?" Rourke breathed through his nose. 3 months ago, I received an anonymous packet." Mara waited. The cabin creaked in the wind. "It contained flight logs," Rourke continued. "Original, not the edited record that went into the report. The raw telemetry from the night in Wardak." Mara's chest tightened. "Where did it come from?" Rourke shook his head once. "No return address. No name. Just a message. You were never the target. You were the witness." Mara stared at him. The words hit in a strange way. She had spent 15 years believing she was abandoned, believing she was collateral damage in a mission gone wrong. Witness made the past change shape. Rourke continued, voice steady now, as if the soldier in him had found the line of the story and refused to let it break. "The telemetry showed a heat spike near the airframe before we lost control," he said. "Not from enemy fire. From inside." Mara's fingers curled against her thigh. "A charge." Rourke nodded once. And there was more. Procurement records tied to a classified modification program. A stealth prototype package that was never supposed to exist in theater. Mara's mouth tightened. So the helicopter was altered. Rourke's eyes stayed on the lantern. And someone wanted the altered wreck to disappear. Mara leaned forward slightly. "You took this to the chain of command." Rourke's laugh was quiet and humorless. "I am the chain of command." Mara held his gaze. "Then why are you here?" Rourke looked away, then back. The rawness returned. "Because my body began to betray me the week after I requested a closed-door meeting with the Senate Armed Services staff." Mara's eyes narrowed. The pain started moving. Rourke nodded. It had been dormant for years. It was there, but it was not screaming. Then it started screaming. Mara's jaw clenched. She pictured Banford's polished hands, the executive wing, the 2 suited men in recovery. She saw a line connecting them, clean and ruthless. "They wanted you to die in a controlled environment," Mara said. Rourke's voice was low. "A surgical complication, a tragic decline, a man in pain, a man who maybe lost his mind." Mara's eyes flashed. "And the hospital was part of it." Rourke's gaze sharpened. "The hospital was convenient. People like Mercer have access everywhere. They do not need loyalty from everyone. They need one weak link. One administrator who wants a donation. One surgeon who wants a promotion." Mara pictured Weller's sweating face, the way he had said Pentagon like it was a magic word. the way he had looked away when the suits stepped in. Mara's voice stayed controlled. Weller did not know who I was. Rourke watched her. No. But he knew which side of power he wanted to stand near. Mara stood and moved to the cabin window. She pushed aside a curtain and looked out at the darkness. The field beyond was black, the trees a ragged line against the sky. I lived, she said quietly, not turning. And I stayed dead on paper for a reason. Rourke's voice softened. Tell me. Mara's fingers tightened on the curtain fabric. For years, she had kept the story locked because unlocking it invited questions she did not trust anyone to hold. But the cabin was small. The night was wide. The man behind her had already broken into the hardest truth. She turned back slowly. When the helicopter went down, Mara said, I did not die in the wreck. Rourke's face tightened as if he was bracing for a blow. I crawled. Mara continued. My leg was fractured. Not a clean break. Bone and pain and grit. I dragged a medic into a washout and hid him under brush. He died before dawn. I stayed because moving meant noise. Rourke's eyes closed for a moment. He opened them again, wet and furious at himself. I waited for a retrieval, Mara said. I waited until the radio went quiet, and even the insects felt loud. Then I moved at night, one hand over my mouth, so my breathing would not give me away. Her voice remained even, but the lantern light caught something tight around her eyes. A local interpreter found me, she said. He had worked with our unit. His name was Faisal. I had treated his daughter for pneumonia the month before. He recognized my face under dirt and blood. He did not ask questions. He put me in the back of a truck under sacks of grain and drove for hours through roads that were not roads. Rourke's jaw clenched. He risked his life. Mara nodded. He risked everything. He brought me to a field clinic run by an aid group. They splinted my leg and cleaned shrapnel from my shoulder. They asked who I was. I told them the truth, and the truth made them go quiet. Rourke stared at her. Because you were on a report. Mara's mouth tightened. Because I was already declared dead in a system that did not make mistakes by accident. Silence filled the cabin. The wood stove ticked softly as it cooled. The aid group moved me across borders, Mara said. Not in an ambulance. In pieces of normal life. A woman with a limp. A nurse without a name. A patient whose papers did not match her face. It took months. When I finally reached a place where phones worked, I tried to call the number I remembered. Rourke swallowed. Mine. Mara's eyes stayed steady. It was disconnected. Rourke's throat tightened. I was in Germany. Mara nodded once. I did not know that. I only knew that every official channel ended in silence. She walked back to the couch and sat on the edge of the chair across from him, close enough for lantern light to reach both of their faces. When I made it home, Mara said I was met by men who did not introduce themselves. They knew my name. They knew my rank. They showed me a file with a death certificate. My death certificate. Signed by Elias Mercer. Rourke's face hardened, his anger turning sharp. They told me I could return to the army as a miracle. Mara continued and spend the rest of my life answering questions. Or I could disappear. They said if I disappeared, I stayed alive. If I spoke, I became a problem that got solved. Rourke's voice was rough, and you chose to disappear. Mara's eyes held his. I chose to breathe. Rourke looked away, shame cutting through him. I would have found you. Mara's voice stayed calm. You did not even know I existed. Rourke's jaw tightened. I believed the report. Mara's gaze sharpened. Reports do not bleed. People bleed. Rourke flinched at that, the words landing like a strike. Mara exhaled slowly. I took my mother's maiden name, she said. Quinn. It was on my dog tags as an emergency contact. It was real enough to hold. I went back to school. I became what I had to become. Trauma was honest. It did not care who my father was, who my commander was, who had signed what. Trauma only cared whether my hands could stop the bleeding. Rourke watched her with something like awe, something like grief. You became a surgeon, Mara nodded. A surgeon can cut away the things that try to kill you. A surgeon can save someone who does not deserve it. Rourke's eyes dropped to his hands. His voice came out low. You saved me. Mara did not answer. The cabin fell quiet again. The lantern hissed softly. Outside, a branch scraped the side of the cabin. Mara's head lifted instantly. Her eyes moved to the window. Rourke's posture tightened, pain or no pain, the soldier awakening. Mara held still and listened. The scrape came again, then stopped. Wind. Only wind. She exhaled, then looked at the specimen bag on the table. That shard, she said, voice flat, is the first piece of proof that can exist outside their control. Rourke nodded, eyes hard. It is also a beacon. Mara's gaze met his. They will come. Rourke's mouth tightened. Mercer does not leave loose ends. Mara stood and walked to the cabin's only bedroom, a small space with a cot and a dresser. She returned with an old duffel that had been tucked under the bed. Inside were basic supplies: gauze, tape, a blood pressure cuff, a small flashlight, a worn stethoscope. I keep a kit, she said simply. Rourke's eyes narrowed. You planned for this. Mara did not smile. I lived long enough to learn not to trust peace. Rourke shifted, grimacing. We need people. Mara's eyes stayed steady. People get you killed. Rourke shook his head, slightly pain-flashing. Not the right ones. Mara stared at him, weighing. Trust was not her default. But the hospital had already proved something. Alone, they were prey. Rourke gestured weakly toward his discarded suit jacket draped over a chair. Inside pocket. Mara walked to the jacket, reached in, and pulled out a rugged satellite phone. It felt heavy, not in weight, but in implication. It was a lifeline to a world she had avoided for 15 years. Rourke watched her. 3 men from my old team went off grid after the investigation I started. They do not trust anyone. They think I am paranoid. They think Mercer has already won. Mara held the phone thumb resting against the rubber casing. Why would they answer? Rourke's voice was quiet. Because they are soldiers. They answer when it matters. Mara's eyes narrowed. And why would they believe you? Rourke looked at her, and the rawness returned. Because you are here. Mara felt the phone's weight settle deeper into her palm. Her throat tightened. She had spent years building a life that did not require this kind of call. She had made herself indispensable in a hospital, in a city, in a system that worked until it did not. She looked down at Rourke. He was pale, stitched together, but his eyes were awake. He was not asking her to forgive him. He was asking her to stand beside him. Dial, Mara said. Rourke took the phone with trembling fingers and punched in a number from memory. His hands were steady, despite pain. That steadiness looked like habit. The line rang once, twice. Then a voice answered, rough and suspicious. This line is dead. Rourke's jaw tightened, Cole. A pause. Then the voice sharpened. Who is this? It is Rourke, Rourke said. Do not hang up. A breath on the other end, slow. You are supposed to be in a hospital. Rourke's eyes flicked to Mara, then back to the phone. I left. You cannot leave a hospital under Pentagon protocol, the voice snapped. Rourke's mouth tightened. Apparently I can. Silence, then a low curse. Tell me you did not bring trouble to my door. Rourke's eyes narrowed. Trouble has been at your door for 15 years. The voice on the line went quiet. When it spoke again, it sounded older. You are still chasing ghosts. Rourke's grip tightened. I found a piece of the helicopter in my spine. Another pause. Say that again. Rourke repeated it. The cabin seemed to hold its breath around the words. Mercer, the voice said finally, and it was not a question. Rourke's eyes hardened. Yes. A low exhale. You have proof. Rourke glanced at Mara. We do. You, the voice said, skeptical again, or someone else. Rourke's gaze stayed on Mara. Someone else. The line went silent, then the voice returned quieter, as if the speaker had moved to a safer room. Put them on. Rourke held the phone out to Mara. Mara stared at it for a heartbeat. Then she took it and raised it to her ear. This is Dr. Mara Quinn, she said, voice steady. Former First Lieutenant Mara Quinn, 40, 4th Medical. There was a long silence on the other end. When the voice returned, it was no longer hard. It was shaken. "That is not possible," the man whispered. "Mara is dead." Mara's eyes fixed on the lantern flame. She said, "and I am not anymore." The man swallowed audibly through the speaker. "Where are you?" Mara's gaze flicked to Rourke. She did not answer immediately. Location was a currency. She had learned to spend it carefully. Rourke's voice came low, directed at her, not the phone. "He is Cole Bennett, Master Sergeant. He saved my life twice." Mara listened to the breathing on the other end, the subtle shift of a man trying to decide whether to step into a nightmare. "You have my voice," Mara said. "You have his voice. Mercer is moving." Two men in suits came into a recovery bay with weapons and tried to take evidence out of my hand. A low sound from the speaker, part, anger part, confirmation. "That tracks." Rourke leaned forward slightly wincing and spoke toward the phone. "Cole, I need you." The line crackled. "You need more than me." "I know," Rourke said. Another pause. "You have Santos and Harlan." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "You still talk to them." "I still know how to find them," Cole replied. If she is real, then Mercer is not just cleaning up. He is afraid." Mara's fingers tightened around the phone. "He should be." Cole's voice went quiet again. "I want to hear her say the grid." Mara's jaw clenched. She hated that part of the memory, but she understood what he needed. Proof lived in specifics. "Grid reference 44 Alpha," Mara said, voice clear. "Wardak Province. The triage tent sat east of the ravine. You kept your rifle pointed downhill because you did not trust the ridge line." The speaker went silent for 3 full breaths. Then Cole spoke, and his voice sounded like a man who had just seen a dead friend walk into sunlight. "Holy," he whispered, then caught himself. Mara's throat tightened. She stared at the table where the specimen bag lay. "Yes." Cole's voice hardened again, but it was a different hardness now. "It was purpose." "Give me a time," he said. Rourke looked at Mara. Mara shook her head once, minimal. "Time could be traced. Time could be used." Rourke spoke into the phone. "You know where I kept the cabin, the one Wallace owned?" Cole exhaled. "You went there." "Yes," Rourke said. Cole's voice turned grim. "If you are there, you are not safe." Mara's eyes flicked to the window. The night outside stayed quiet. Rourke's voice was low. "Neither are you." Cole was silent for a beat. "I am already not safe. I just got used to it." Mara listened to the change in his breathing, the shift of a man reaching for gear that lived near his bed. "Bring only who you trust," she said. Cole's voice came back immediately. "I do not trust anyone." Mara's mouth tightened. "Then bring the ones who would die before they sold you." A pause, then a low chuckle that carried no humor. "That is fewer than you think." Rourke swallowed hard pain tugging at his incision. "Cole." Cole's voice softened for a fraction. "Stay alive. Both of you." Mara ended the call and set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. For a long moment, the cabin was quiet. Rourke's eyes were on her. "You did that like you were born for it." Mara's gaze stayed forward. "I was trained for it. Then I trained myself to forget." Rourke nodded slowly. "For 15 years. Mara looked at him. "For 15 years, I have walked through hospitals and listened to men thank soldiers for their service. I have watched politicians cut ribbons for trauma wings while signing budgets that never covered the bodies that came home. I have saved drunk drivers and abused spouses and teenagers who crashed cars they should not have been driving. I did not do it because I believed in the system." Rourke's eyes did not leave her face. "I did it," Mara continued, "because hands that stop bleeding are hands that cannot be used to destroy." Rourke's jaw tightened. "And Mercer destroyed anyway." Mara's mouth flattened. "Yes." Rourke shifted on the couch, grimacing. Mara moved automatically, checking his posture, adjusting a pillow to keep pressure off his neck. Her hands touched his shoulder with clinical intent. The contact still sent an old electricity up her arm, and she hated it. Rourke watched her. "I am sorry," he said quietly. Mara's eyes met his. She did not soften. She did not lash out. The apology was a small thing against 15 years. It was also a thing he had never been forced to say on a battlefield. "Save your strength," Mara replied. Rourke's breath hitched. "I am saving it." Mara looked away and walked to the table. She picked up the specimen bag again and studied the serial stamp. She had seen enough procurement labels and lot numbers in hospital supply chains to understand how systems hid in numbers. "You said Mercer handled the report," she said. "What was he doing in Wardak?" Rourke stared at the lantern flame as if watching it for answers. "He was not there for us," he said. "He was there for a meeting." Mara's eyes narrowed. "With who?" Rourke's voice lowered. "We thought we were tracking a high-value target. Instead, we found a clearing and a convoy. We saw men we recognized, local warlords who were supposed to be hunted. We also saw Americans who were not in uniform." Mara felt cold slide through her chest. "Contractors." Rourke nodded. "And they were not negotiating peace. They were trading." Mara's jaw clenched. "Trading what?" Rourke's eyes sharpened, anger tightening his face. "Heroin for missiles. And not just that. There were cases with labels that did not match the contents. Rare earth mineral samples. Lithium cobalt things that made phone batteries and guided weapons." Mara stared at him. "They were mining." Rourke nodded once. "They were using the war as a cover to move resources out. Money that never hit the budget. Operations that never hit the record." Mara's fingers tightened around the plastic bag. "And Mercer ran it." Rourke's voice was quiet. "Mercer was the handler. He heard my radio call. He realized I had seen too much. He ordered the extraction not to save us, but to remove us. Then he made sure the helicopter did not make it home." Mara felt her throat tighten. "And he made sure no one came back for the bodies." Rourke's eyes were hard now. "And he made sure you stayed dead." Mara swallowed. The lantern hissed softly. Outside, a coyote called once, then went silent. Mara set the specimen bag down and walked back to the window. She stared into the night, seeing the outline of trees. Her reflection stared back faintly, a woman who had survived too many endings. Rourke's voice came from behind her, rough. "I stayed in the military because it was the only place I could hide from him." Mara did not turn. "You rose." Rourke exhaled. "I rose because I wanted access. I wanted leverage." Mara's eyes narrowed. "And you thought you could outweight him?" Rourke's voice came low. "I thought if I played long enough, I could bring him down without making noise." Mara turned slowly. "And then you made noise." Rourke nodded, and he answered. Mara's jaw tightened. "He did not expect me." Rourke's eyes held hers. "No, he expected Banford." Mara felt anger flare hot and controlled. She pictured Banford's face in that glossy brochure, the kind of smile that came from being told he was important. "He would have slipped," Mara said. Rourke's mouth tightened, and the report would have said complications. Mara walked back to the couch, standing over him. "You asked for the best because you were afraid." Rourke's gaze lifted. He did not deny it. "Yes." Mara's voice lowered. "You were afraid of the chair." Rourke's jaw flexed. "I was afraid of being powerless." Mara stared at him for a long beat. "Welcome." Rourke flinched, then nodded, accepting the strike. "I deserve that." Mara looked away, unwilling to let herself linger in the satisfaction of it. The cabin creaked again. Mara's head lifted. This time it was not wind. A vehicle engine distant low, then gone. Mara's body tightened. She crossed to the lantern and dimmed it slightly. The cabin fell into deeper shadow. Rourke's voice was a whisper. "Someone." Mara shook her head once, listening. No tires on gravel now. No doors. The sound had been far on the county road. Still, her skin stayed prickled. "Your phone?" Mara said. Rourke gestured toward the table. Mara grabbed the satellite phone and held it thumb ready. Minutes passed. Then a soft knock on the cabin door, 3 taps, spaced like a code. Mara's breath stopped. Rourke's eyes narrowed. "That is Cole." Mara did not move immediately. She stepped to the side of the door, not in front of it, and kept the phone in her hand like it could become a weapon. She did not open the door. She spoke through it. "Name," she said. A familiar, rough voice answered. "Bennett." Mara's jaw tightened. "And the ridgeline." A pause. Then the voice returned low. I kept my rifle downhill because I did not trust the ridge line. Mara unlatched the door and opened it. Cole Bennett stood in the doorway, tall, broad beard threaded with gray. His eyes swept the cabin in a single motion, assessing, then landed on Mara's face. He went still. For a second, the hard soldier look dropped away, and a young man's shock surfaced. Mara, he said, and the word sounded like it cost him something. Mara held his gaze. Cole. He stepped inside without asking, shutting the door behind him. He smelled like road dust and coffee and old gun oil. His eyes moved to the couch where Rourke lay. You look like hell, Cole said. Rourke's mouth twitched faintly. I feel worse. Cole's gaze flicked to the dressing on Rourke's neck. He looked back at Mara. You did the surgery? Mara nodded. He lived. Cole's eyes sharpened. That means Mercer failed. Rourke's voice was quiet. He tried again in recovery. Cole's jaw tightened. He sensed suits. Mara's eyes stayed hard. Yes. Cole exhaled slowly and set a small backpack on the table. Santos is on the way. Harlan, too. Mara's chest tightened. You brought them. Cole's gaze held hers. When a dead woman calls a deadline and says 44 Alpha, I bring whoever still has a spine. Rourke's eyes stayed on Cole. You believe now. Cole's face was grim. I believed before. I just did not want it to be true. Mara moved to the table and lifted the specimen bag. The shard glinted. Cole's eyes narrowed. That is from the bird. Mara nodded, and it is fused. Cole's mouth tightened. Thermite. Mara studied him. You have seen it. Cole's gaze did not flinch. I have seen what it does to vehicles when someone wants them to look like something else. Rourke pushed himself upright, slightly wincing. Cole stepped forward instinctively, then stopped when Mara lifted a hand, surgeon authority. He stays down, Mara said. Cole nodded once. Mara set the bag back down. Her mind moved fast, reorganizing the night around new realities. 2 more men coming meant more eyes, more muscle, more risk. It also meant less loneliness. Cole walked to the window and peered out into the dark. We were followed for a mile, he said quietly. Lost them on a ranch road. Could be nothing. Could be Mercer. Mara's throat tightened. If he has eyes on this place, we do not have time. Cole turned back. Then we move. Mara's eyes narrowed. He cannot travel. Cole looked at Rourke, then back at Mara. He can travel if he has to. Rourke's voice came low. We do not stay where they can box us in. Mara held the room with her gaze. We move when I say he can move. Cole nodded. Fair. A low rumble sounded outside, then gravel crunching. Headlights swept across the cabin wall, then cut. Mara's body tightened. She reached for the lantern and dimmed it to a glow. Another knock faster this time. Cole moved toward the door, but Mara beat him to it. She stayed to the side again. Name, Mara called. A different voice answered rougher, with a trace of the southwest. Ray Santos. Mara unlatched and opened a door. The door. Ray Santos stepped in shorter than Cole, built like a man who had never stopped carrying weight. His eyes swept the cabin, then locked onto Mara's face. He froze. His mouth opened, then shut. His eyes flashed wet for a fraction, then hardened again. No, he whispered. Mara held his gaze. Yes. Ray swallowed hard. We buried you. Mara's voice was quiet. You buried a report. Ray stepped closer, then stopped as if unsure whether he was allowed to approach. Jesus, he muttered, then shook his head hard. You are real. Mara's eyes stayed steady. I am. Ray's gaze moved to Rourke. Boss. Rourke nodded once. Ray. Ray's jaw tightened. Mercer. Rourke's voice was low. Yes. Ray set his bag down and rubbed a hand over his face, as if trying to wake from a nightmare. Then he looked at Mara again. You survived, he said. Mara's mouth tightened. Barely. Ray exhaled, then turned to Cole. Harlan. Cole nodded toward the door. Close. Footsteps on the porch. A third knock. Mara opened the door, and a man stepped in with a limp that looked older than his years. Miles Harlan, eyes, sharp hair cut close, beard rough. He saw Mara and stopped so hard his shoulders jolted. His voice came out hoarse. "Mara Quinn." Mara nodded once. Miles stared as if he could not trust sight. "You are breathing." Mara's eyes did not soften. "So are you." Miles swallowed, then looked at Rourke. "General." Rourke's gaze stayed hard. "All of you are here." Cole spoke, voice grim. "We came because you called. We stayed because she answered." Mara looked at the three men in the lantern light. Men who had lived with the same night in their heads. Men who had carried it differently. She did not feel comfort. She felt alignment, the kind that came when strangers shared a wound. Cole stepped to the table and pointed at the specimen bag. "Show them." Mara lifted the bag and held it out. Ray leaned in, first, eyes narrowing. Miles followed, studying the fused edge. Ray's mouth tightened. "That is deliberate." Miles nodded slowly. "That is not a crash." Rourke's voice was rough. "Mercer tried to erase our witness. He tried to erase her. He tried to erase me." Cole's eyes sharpened. "Then we stopped letting him decide the narrative." Mara watched Cole say it and felt something cold and heavy settle into her chest. Narrative meant cameras. It meant public. It meant walking into a place where Mercer's reach was strongest. Mara's fingers tightened on the plastic bag. "Public gets people killed," she said. Ray looked at her, not challenging, just honest. "Private gets people buried." Mara held his gaze. The words landed because they were true. Rourke tried to sit up again. Mara moved instantly, pressing him back with a firm hand. "No," she said. Rourke's jaw clenched. Mara's voice stayed flat. "Your incision is 6 hours old. You move when I allow it." Rourke stared at her, then nodded once, a soldier accepting field medicine. Miles looked at Mara. "What do you need?" Mara breathed out slowly. The question was simple. The answer was not. "I need him stable," Mara said. "I need the drain monitored. I need him hydrated. I need him not bleeding." Cole nodded, already shifting into logistics without speaking, like it was a plan. He moved toward the kitchen and began searching for water. Ray checked the cabin's door and windows, quiet and practiced. Miles stood near Rourke, eyes scanning the room as if threats might crawl out of the walls. Mara walked to the table and opened the first aid kit again. She laid out gauze and tape with surgical neatness. Rourke watched her hands. "You do not have to do this," he said quietly. Mara did not look up. "I do." Rourke's throat moved, because of the oath. Mara's fingers paused. Then she resumed. "Because of the night you left me. I do not get to let that night keep taking." Rourke's eyes tightened. "That is not forgiveness." Mara finally looked at him. "No." The cabin settled into a tense rhythm. Mara checked vitals with an old cuff, listened to breath sounds with the worn stethoscope, watched the drain output and the color of his skin. The men rotated positions without speaking much, each one taking the role he had learned in other places, other times. Hours passed like that, measured in quiet tasks and distant sounds outside. At some point, Cole returned from the kitchen with a mug of water and helped Rourke sip slowly. Ray found a battery-powered radio and turned it low, just enough to catch local news. A voice on the radio mentioned a hospital incident in Austin, vague and careful, a statement about a patient transfer and an ongoing internal review. No names, no details. The kind of announcement designed to prevent panic while telling the right people what to look for. Mara turned the radio off. "Mercer moves fast," Miles said quietly. Rourke's eyes stayed hard. "He has been moving for 15 years. Cole looked at Mara. "You have been dead for 15 years. If Mercer is Secretary of Defense now, he sits on everything. Courts, press, agencies." Mara's jaw tightened. "Then we stay quiet." Ray shook his head once. "Quiet is what he expects." Mara stared at the specimen bag. Her mind returned to the recovery bay. The way Reeves' eyes locked on the plastic. The way Weller had smiled like a man trying to please a predator. Mara spoke without looking up. "If I am alive in their system, they will remove me." Cole's voice was grim. "Then you do not let them find you in the dark." Mara's gaze lifted to his. "You want me on a camera?" Cole did not blink. I want you where Mercer cannot erase you without the whole country seeing him try. Mara's throat tightened. She hated the idea. She also felt the logic in it like bone under a scalpel, unavoidable. Rourke's voice came low, steady despite pain. I have the flight logs in a secure cache. I have procurement records. I have a trail that leads to Mercer's office. What I did not have was a witness who survived the night. Mara's fingers tightened around the bag. I am not a symbol. Rourke's eyes met hers. You are a fact. Silence settled again. Mara looked at the three men in the cabin, men who had carried the same night and returned to different lives that never fit right after. She looked at Rourke, stitched and weak, but still stubborn enough to stand up to a system that could crush him. She felt the old anger shift into something narrower and sharper. She set the specimen bag down and reached for the satellite phone. Give me the number for someone outside Mercer's reach, Mara said. Cole's eyebrows lifted. Outside his reach is a short list. Start the list, Mara replied. Cole looked at Ray and Miles. Ray nodded once thinking. Miles exhaled slowly, then spoke. There is, Senator Dana Whitaker, Miles said. Veterans Committee? She hated Mercer before he got that chair. She still hates him. Rourke's eyes narrowed. Whitaker will listen if it comes with proof. Mara's voice was flat. Then we give her proof. Cole held up a hand. Phones get traced. Mara's gaze did not shift. Then we do not use a phone that lives in a network. Cole's eyes flicked to the satellite handset. That is still a signal. Mara met his gaze. Then we keep it short. She turned to Rourke. Can you speak without collapsing? Rourke's jaw tightened. Yes. Mara nodded once. She looked at the men around her. No one says names on the line, Mara said. No locations. No details that can be used if it is intercepted. Just enough to open a door. Cole nodded. Ray and Miles did too. Mara dialed. The line rang. Once. Twice. Then a woman's voice answered, crisp and guarded. Office of Senator Whitaker. Mara's voice stayed calm. This message is for the senator directly. It concerns a classified incident from Wardak Province 15 years ago and a current medical emergency involving a 4-star general. A pause. The assistant's tone tightened. Ma'am, who is this? Mara's eyes fixed on the lantern flame. Tell her the caller is legally dead. Tell her the phrase 44 Alpha. If she knows what that means, she will take the call. Silence on the line. Then the assistant spoke, voice lower. Hold. The cabin held still. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. A click, then a new voice, older, sharper, carrying authority that did not need volume. This is Whitaker. Mara's throat tightened. She kept her voice steady. Senator, my name is Dr. Mara Quinn. In 2009, I was listed KIA at grid 44 Alpha. I am alive. I have physical evidence from a helicopter sabotage and a documented attempt to seize that evidence inside a Texas hospital today. A long silence on the line, heavy and careful. Then Whitaker spoke each word, precise. Doctor, if you are who you say you are, you understand the gravity of what you are alleging. Mara's jaw clenched. I understand the weight of a death certificate signed by a man who now controls the Pentagon. Whitaker's breathing shifted. Name. Mara did not give it. You already know the name you are thinking. Another silence, then Whitaker's voice hardened. Do you have proof? Mara looked at the specimen bag on the table. She looked at Rourke. Yes. Whitaker's tone stayed controlled. You are in danger. Mara's mouth tightened. Yes. Whitaker spoke again, quieter now. You need to deliver that proof to an oversight channel that cannot be buried. Mara's eyes stayed steady. Then give me that channel. Whitaker's voice held a thin edge. I will send a secure contact method. You will not speak to anyone else. You will not walk into any local authority. You will not trust anyone claiming to be federal without verification. Mara swallowed, understood. Whitaker paused. Doctor, are you with General Rourke? Mara's eyes flicked to Rourke. Yes. Whitaker exhaled slowly. Keep him alive. Mara's voice was flat. That is my specialty. The line clicked off. Mara lowered the phone and set it on the table. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. Cole watched her face. She listened. Mara nodded once. She heard enough. Ray's jaw tightened. Mercer will hear too. Mara looked at the window. Then we do not sit here and wait for him to arrive. Rourke shifted, grimacing, then forced himself to speak. We move at dawn. Mara's eyes snapped to him. You move when your blood pressure is stable and your drain output stays consistent. Rourke held her gaze. Then make it consistent. Mara's mouth tightened. I cannot bully physiology. Rourke's eyes were hard. You bullied a recovery unit full of federal agents. Mara stared at him for a beat, then looked away. That was easier than your body. Cole stepped closer, voice low. If Mercer sends a team, it will not be 2 suits with badges. It will be something quieter, something that does not trigger a code blue. Mara's throat tightened. She imagined a suppressed sound in the woods, a door opened without a knock. She moved to the couch and checked Rourke again. His pulse was steady enough. His skin temperature was normal. The drain output was slowing. He was in pain, but he was alive. And alive was the only condition she could work with. She taped the drain bulb more securely to prevent tugging. She adjusted the dressing. She gave him water again, slow and controlled. She watched him swallow, watched his throat work, watched the tension in his jaw. Rourke looked at her. You have done enough. Mara did not look up. Enough is a word used by people who do not bleed. Rourke's voice softened almost a whisper. Mara. Mara's hands paused. She looked at him. His eyes were not cold now. They were tired. They carried a kind of regret that did not ask for absolution, only acknowledgement. I loved you, he said quietly. Mara's throat tightened. She did not let her face change. Love did not keep me alive, she replied. Rourke swallowed hard. No, you did. Mara turned away and stood needing distance before the old wound opened. Outside, the night remained quiet. Inside the cabin held 4 soldiers and 1 surgeon, all of them awake in different ways, all of them listening for the same thing. A vehicle engine in the distance. A footstep on gravel. A knock that did not belong. Mara moved to the table and picked up the specimen bag one more time. The shard glinted indifferent and small, as if it could not understand how many lives it had twisted. She slid it into a hard case from her duffel, then snapped the case shut. Cole watched her. You are carrying it. Mara nodded. No one else touches it. Ray's mouth tightened. Mercer will want it back. Mara's eyes were flat. He will not get it from my hands. Rourke's voice came low from the couch. He already tried. Mara looked at him, then at the men in the cabin. Get some sleep in shifts, she said. 2 hours at a time. 1 person stays on the window. 1 stays on the door. No fires. No lights in the windows. Cole nodded. Ray moved toward the door, settling into a position with his back to the wall. Miles took the window eyes, scanning the dark. Mara sat in the chair beside the couch, close enough to check Rourke's breathing, far enough to keep her heart locked. Rourke's eyes stayed open. Do you ever sleep? Mara's voice was quiet. Not well. Rourke's throat moved. Neither do I. The lantern burned low. The cabin creaked. The wind pressed against the walls like a patient hand. Mara watched the drain line rise and fall with Rourke's breath. She listened to the men shifting quietly in the room. She held the hard case with the shard in it against her thigh, a cold weight that anchored her to the present. At some point, Rourke's breathing deepened. Not sleep, but rest. His eyes finally closed. Mara kept watching anyway. Because in her world, the moment you stopped watching was the moment something entered the room and changed everything. Dawn came without mercy. A thin, gray light pushed through the cabin windows and turned dust into floating ash. Mara had not slept. She had sat in the chair beside Rourke's couch, listening to his breathing and the small sounds of men trying to rest with one eye open. Cole Bennett rose first, quiet, controlled. He checked the door latch, the window line, the dirt outside for fresh tracks. Ray Santos boiled water on the old stove and poured it into dented mugs without speaking. Miles Harlan stood near the window and watched the tree line like it owed him money. Mara took Rourke's vitals again. Pulse steadier, skin warm, drain output slowing and darkening the way she wanted it to. His blood pressure was still high, but the numbers had stopped climbing. Rourke opened his eyes when she pressed the cuffs Velcro loose. You are still here, he said. Mara kept her tone flat. Your neck is still attached. I am still responsible. Rourke tried to sit up. His face tightened with pain. Mara pressed him down with 2 fingers. "Not yet," she said. "I can stand," he insisted. "You can suffer," Mara replied. "Standing requires more than stubbornness." Rourke's jaw flexed. He looked past her to Cole and the others. "We cannot stay." Mara met his gaze. "You cannot bleed." For a long second they stared at each other, both of them used to giving orders. Then Rourke's eyes shifted a concession he did not like making. "Tell me what you need," he said. Mara nodded once. Water. Small sips. No sudden movement. "I want you upright for 5 minutes, then back down. If your vision swims, you it. If you feel heat in your neck, you tell me." Rourke swallowed, "And if I do not?" Mara's expression did not change. "Then you will pass out, and I will still move you, but I will be angry while I do it." A faint twitch pulled at the corner of his mouth. It was not a smile. It was recognition. Mara opened the hard case and checked the specimen bag again. The shard lay inside like a sliver of frozen fire. She closed the case and kept it near her. A soft buzz came from the satellite phone. Cole lifted it, listened, and handed it to Mara without comment. Mara put it to her ear. Senator Whitaker's voice came through low and clipped as if she was speaking from a room where phones did not belong. Dr. Quinn Whitaker said, "You have a narrow window." Mara's eyes flicked to the men at the cabin. "Speak." Whitaker did not waste words. "You will deliver the physical evidence to my counsel in person, not by mail, not through any federal intermediary. You will meet at the Travis County District Courthouse, the clerk entrance at 9:40. A vehicle with county plates will be waiting. You will get in. You will say nothing to anyone else. Do not bring phones." Mara's throat tightened. The courthouse was local, not Washington. A smart move. It kept the first handoff away from Mercer's capital machinery. Whitaker continued. "General Rourke will be placed on the witness list for a closed session. The public hearing is at noon in Washington. The closed session starts at 10. If he is medically able, he will appear. If he cannot, you will appear." Mara's grip tightened on the handset. "Mercer will try to block entry." Whitaker's voice stayed hard. "Mercer can try. He does not control the Senate doors." Mara's eyes narrowed. "He controls people." Whitaker paused. "Then you bring yours." The line went dead. Mara lowered the phone. Cole watched her face. "Courthouse," Mara said quietly, 9:40. Ray's eyes sharpened. "Local handoff." "That is safer." Miles's mouth tightened. "Safer is relative." Rourke pushed himself upright again, slower this time, obeying Mara's pacing. He sat on the edge of the couch, feet planted, breathing controlled. "I am going," he said. Mara stepped closer, checking the drain line, the dressing, the way his shoulders held tension. "You are going if you can stand without falling." Rourke's eyes met hers. "I can." Mara watched him for another beat, then nodded once. "Then we do it right." Cole moved to the table and opened his pack. Inside were plain clothes, no military markings, no gear that looked like gear. He tossed a folded flannel shirt to Rourke, then a jacket. "Something that does not scream, General," Cole said. Rourke's voice was dry. "I do not scream." Ray snorted once. "You do not have to." Mara taped the drain bulb tighter, then helped Rourke stand. His legs trembled at first. He went pale, then forced his breath into a slow rhythm until the dizziness passed. Mara watched his eyes waiting for the glassy edge that meant fainting. It did not come. He reached for the couch arm like it was a rail on a helicopter. Mara said quietly, 5 minutes. Rourke nodded once. Miles stepped closer, ready to catch him without making it obvious. Rourke's hand lifted and touched the dressing at his neck, protective. His fingers came away clean. "I am still walking," he said softly, and the words sounded like disbelief. Mara's voice stayed steady. "You will keep walking if you stop trying to prove something every time you stand." Rourke glanced at her. "That is how I survived." Mara met his gaze. "That is not how you heal." Rourke did not answer. He did not argue either. They left the cabin in 2 vehicles. A plain SUV that Cole had brought and the stolen van that Mara drove, both of them moving at normal speed on back roads, avoiding the highway until they had to merge. They stopped once behind a closed feed store to switch drivers and switch plates. Cole handled it like muscle memory. Mara watched the road while he worked, eyes scanning for a shape that moved wrong. At 9:28, they reached the courthouse. The building looked like every county courthouse in America. Stone steps, glass doors, a flag hanging still in the morning air. People came and went, with coffee cups, files tucked under arms, faces fixed in their own problems. Mara parked 2 blocks away and waited in the van while Cole walked the area once slow and casual. He came back and nodded. Ray and Miles helped Rourke out of the SUV. He moved carefully, one hand on the door frame, the other near his neck. He did not use a cane yet. He refused the idea with his posture alone. Mara kept the hard case tucked under her arm and walked with them, her white coat pulled over plain clothes. It made her look like what she was. It also made her visible. Visibility felt like a risk and a shield at the same time. They entered through the clerk entrance as instructed. A county employee waited by a side door, eyes flicking quickly over their faces. She did not ask names. She opened the door and nodded them through. A plain sedan with county plates idled in a back lot. A man in a gray suit stood beside it. He looked like a lawyer who never slept, hair neat, eyes sharp, hands clean. He spoke without introduction. Dr. Quinn. Mara did not hand him the case immediately. Verification. The man's gaze did not waver. Dana Whitaker's counsel. My name is Julian Price. The phrase is Riverstone. Mara's jaw tightened. She had not been given that phrase. Whitaker had not sent it through the phone. That meant Price was either legitimate or deeply prepared. Mara looked at Cole. Cole's eyes stayed hard. Say it again. Price repeated it, then opened his jacket slowly and showed a Senate credential clipped inside the seal, visible and real. Mara still did not move. Where will the evidence go? Price answered without flinch. Chain of custody begins with my signature. It goes into a sealed vault under committee counsel. It is cataloged, photographed, and duplicated for independent metallurgy. You keep a copy of the paperwork. Mara's fingers loosened slightly around the handle of the case. She handed it over. Price took it like it was heavier than it looked. He did not open it. He did not look inside. He simply set it on the back seat and shut the door. He handed Mara a folder. Inside were printed documents already prepared. Temporary witness protection forms, a sealed subpoena, a travel itinerary with no airline names and no hotel addresses. Mara looked at it, then looked at Price. We are going to Washington. Price nodded once. The committee chartered a small aircraft. It leaves from a private airstrip in 40 minutes. You will ride under committee protection. Rourke's eyes narrowed. Mercer will know. Price's expression stayed careful. He will learn. Not soon enough to stop the door from opening. Mara watched Price's face for any tremor. There was none. This man lived near power and had learned how to keep his fear invisible. Price's eyes flicked to Rourke's dressing. General, are you medically stable? Rourke's voice was low. Stable enough, Mara cut in. He is fresh post-op. He moved slowly. Price nodded, not surprised. Then we keep you out of crowds until the hearing. Cole's eyes stayed hard. And if Mercer sends someone, Price's voice remained even. Then it becomes a federal crime in front of a Senate committee. Ray exhaled quietly. Crimes do not stop bullets. Price met his gaze. Cameras do more than you think. Mara did not trust cameras. She trusted hands, angles, exits. They moved. The sedan led the SUV, followed Mara, driving the van behind them. The route changed twice. The airstrip was small, quiet, tucked behind a line of trees and hangars. A plain jet waited with no markings beyond the required tail numbers. 2 men in dark suits stood near the stairs, but these moved differently from Reeve. These looked like committee security, not Mercer's reach. Their eyes were alert, but they did not stare at Mara's hands. Mara helped Rourke up the stairs, one step at a time. His breath tightened once, then eased. He sat in a forward seat and closed his eyes for a beat, jaw clenched. Mara sat across from him. Cole, Ray, and Miles took seats behind, silent and still. As the plane lifted, the Texas ground fell away. Ranch land turned to patchwork. The sky widened. Mara felt her stomach drop and clenched her hands in her lap until her nails bit skin. Rourke opened his eyes and watched her, then looked away, giving her the dignity of not being seen in that moment. Hours later, Washington rose beneath them like a different world. Steel and stone, wide roads, a city designed to look permanent while it constantly rewrote itself. They were taken through a private corridor into a committee holding room inside the Senate complex. The air smelled like paper and old wood. The walls held framed photos of hearings that had reshaped history. Mara saw faces she recognized from news clips and wished she did not. Julian Price met them again. He handed Rourke a folded cane without comment. Rourke stared at it. Mara said quietly, "Use it." Rourke's jaw tightened. "I do not need it." Mara's eyes stayed flat. "You are not performing, you are healing. Use it." Rourke took the cane, then stood slowly testing his legs. Cole watched the room's corners. Ray watched the door. Miles watched the hallway through a narrow window. They looked like men, waiting for a breach. A staffer entered brisk and controlled. "General Rourke. Dr. Quinn. Closed session begins in 10. Rourke's eyes narrowed. "Mercer will try to keep it closed." Price nodded. "He is already insisting on national security restrictions." Senator Whitaker insisted on public testimony after the closed session. If the committee believes the evidence is credible, the door opens. Mara's throat tightened. And if they do not, Price's gaze held hers. "Then you walk out alive. That is the minimum outcome." Mara did not like minimum. She followed Rourke into the closed session first. The room was smaller than the public chamber, but heavier. Senators sat around a polished table. Staff sat behind them, hands poised over notebooks. An American flag stood in the corner like a witness. Senator Dana Whitaker sat at the center spine, straight, eyes sharp. She looked like a woman who had learned how to survive rooms full of men who smiled while cutting. Her gaze landed on Rourke. It flicked to Mara. It held on Mara's face for half a second longer, a silent acknowledgement of something that should not exist. General Rourke Whitaker said, "Dr. Quinn." Mara did not speak. She waited. Silence was a tool. Whitaker's eyes went to Price. He nodded once. Whitaker opened a folder. "We received physical evidence from Dr. Quinn under counsel chain of custody. We also received flight telemetry and procurement records from General Rourke. We will begin with the evidence." A sealed bag was placed on the table, the shard visible inside. Under this room's lighting, it looked even cleaner, more deliberate. A senator leaned in, brows knit. "That is from his spine," Mara said calmly. "Yes." Another senator frowned. "How do we know it is what you claim?" Price slid a document forward. Initial custody log. Time stamped. Witnessed. Photograph record. The committee's independent metallurgist is on standby. Whitaker's gaze returned to Mara. "Doctor, under oath, state your name and your status." Mara's throat tightened once, then steadied. "Dr. Mara Quinn, Chief of Trauma Surgery at Lone Star Surgical Institute in Austin, Texas. Former First Lieutenant Mara Quinn, United States Army. Listed KYA at grid reference 44 Alpha in Wardak Province." The room shifted. A senator's pen paused. Whitaker held Mara's gaze. "You are legally deceased." Mara nodded once. "Yes." A quiet murmur moved along the table. Not disbelief, not yet. Recognition that something rotten had been wrapped in paperwork. Whitaker looked at Rourke. "General, state your claim." Rourke's voice was gravel steady. The helicopter was sabotaged from within. The official report was falsified. The KIA listing for Lieutenant Quinn was used to erase a witness. Secretary of Defense Elias Mercer controlled the debrief and the report. He now has motive to eliminate me because I initiated oversight inquiry. Whitaker's eyes narrowed. Motive connected to what? Rourke's jaw tightened. An off-book resource extraction program and weapons trafficking facilitated through contractor intermediaries. We observed a meeting in Wardak. I reported it. The extraction order came from the same chain that later sealed the report. A senator leaned forward. "That is an extraordinary accusation." Rourke's gaze did not waver. Extraordinary is watching your own aircraft burn and being told it was the enemy when the heat signature came from inside. Whitaker tapped the table lightly. Doctor, explain the shard. Mara kept her tone clinical. The fragment is titanium alloy consistent with aircraft-grade material. The edge shows heat fusion beyond what typical crash and fuel fire would produce. Aviation fuel does not reach the temperatures required to fuse titanium in this pattern. The serial marking appears consistent with a procurement batch used in a classified modification program. Those claims can be tested independently. A senator frowned. You are offering inference. Mara's eyes stayed steady. I am offering material that does not match the official narrative. If you want certainty, you test it. If you want silence, you bury it. The room went quiet. Whitaker's mouth tightened slightly approval without warmth. Whitaker turned to staff. Bring in the metallurgist. A man entered, white hair, calm hands. He wore no uniform. He carried a small kit and a demeanor built for facts. He did not do a full lab workup in the room. He examined the shard, visually checked markings, measured thickness, noted the fused edge. He looked up and spoke carefully. This is aircraft-grade titanium alloy, he said. The edge shows evidence of localized high heat exposure. I cannot attribute a specific source of heat without a lab analysis, but this is consistent with intentional thermal exposure. One senator exhaled slowly. Whitaker looked down the table, eyes moving from face to face. She saw the same thing Mara saw. A door beginning to open. Whitaker set her hands flat on the table. We will move to public session. A staffer hesitated. Senator, Secretary Mercer is insisting on closed classification. Whitaker's eyes hardened. Secretary Mercer can insist in the public chamber as well. The senators stood. Chairs scraped. Staff moved fast. The closed session dissolved into motion. Mara's heartbeat picked up. She did not show it. They were guided through corridors and into the public hearing chamber. The room was larger, brighter, full of cameras and people. Press clustered behind rope lines. Staffers filled seats. Senators sat at the dais like judges. At the witness table sat Secretary of Defense Elias Mercer. He looked impeccable. Dark suit, flag pin, hair neat, expression carefully somber, the kind of face that could deliver bad news while making it feel inevitable. Mara's stomach tightened. She had never met him in person. She had only seen his signature. She had only heard his name spoken with caution. Mercer's eyes lifted as the room settled. He saw Rourke at the side entrance, and his face held for a fraction too long. The somber mask did not crack, but something behind his eyes sharpened like a blade being unsheathed. Senator Whitaker took her seat and struck the gavel. We are resuming, she said. Secretary Mercer, you have stated that General Rourke's disappearance from a Texas hospital suggests medical instability. Mercer nodded slowly, voice smooth. Senator, with respect, General Rourke has endured extreme trauma. His recent surgery was high risk. We have reason to believe his cognitive state may be compromised. Rourke stepped forward, cane tapping once against the floor. The sound cut through the chamber like a gunshot in a quiet hallway. A murmur swept the room. Cameras shifted. People leaned forward. Rourke did not look at the press. He looked straight at Mercer. Whitaker's voice remained calm. General Rourke, please come forward. Rourke walked down the aisle, measured, controlled. The cane clicked in rhythm with his breath. He looked pale. His suit hung looser than it should. Pain lived in his posture, but so did will. Mercer watched him approach, and for a moment Mara saw a small tightening at Mercer's jaw. Not fear, calculation. Rourke stopped at the witness table. He did not sit. Mr. Chairman, Rourke said, voice carrying without effort. I am here. Whitaker's gaze flicked to Mercer. Secretary, your statement implied General Rourke is unable to appear. He appears. Mercer smiled, faintly practiced. Senator, I am relieved. My concern was for his safety. Rourke's eyes narrowed. You were concerned I would speak. Whitaker lifted a hand. General, you will be sworn. Rourke raised his right hand. The oath was recited. He spoke the words like a man who had said harder things in darker places. Whitaker turned to Mara. Dr. Quinn, come forward. Mara stepped into the aisle, walking past the press line. Cameras snapped. She kept her chin level the way she walked into trauma bays and operating rooms. She wore a simple dark suit under her white coat hair pulled back tight. She carried a thick medical file in one hand and nothing visible in the other. As she reached the witness table, Mercer's gaze locked onto her. For a breath, his mask slipped. Not in expression, but in attention. His eyes widened just enough to reveal what he believed was impossible. Whitaker's voice cut through the room. "State your name." Mara placed the medical file on the table, then raised her hand for the oath. "My name is Dr. Mara Quinn," she said. "Chief of Trauma Surgery at Lone Star Surgical Institute." Whitaker's eyes held hers. And 15 years ago, Mara's throat tightened, then steadied. "I was First Lieutenant Mara Quinn, listed KIA at Grid 44 Alpha." The chamber shifted. Press whispered. A senator's brows knit. Mercer stood abruptly. "Senator, this is absurd. This woman is an imposter." Whitaker's gavel hit the desk once. "Sit down, Secretary Mercer." Mercer's hands tightened on the chair. He did not sit yet. His eyes were on Mara, like she was a stain he wanted to wipe away. Mara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a sealed evidence bag. Inside the titanium shard caught the hearing room's light. She set it on the table in front of Whitaker. The cameras zoomed. The room went quiet. Whitaker looked down at it. "What is this?" Mara's voice stayed calm. "A fragment of titanium alloy I removed from General Rourke's spine yesterday. It contains a partial serial marking and shows heat fusion consistent with intentional thermal exposure." Mercer's voice rose. "That is classified material. She has no authority to handle it." Mara's eyes lifted to Mercer. "You sent agents into a recovery unit to seize it." A murmur rippled. Whitaker's gaze snapped to Mercer. Mercer's face tightened. "That is a lie." Rourke spoke voice cold. "Two armed men entered my recovery bay and attempted to force transfer and seize surgical debris. They identified themselves as Pentagon agents." Whitaker's eyes hardened. "Secretary Mercer, did you authorize a transfer operation inside a civilian hospital?" Mercer's voice remained smooth, but the edges tightened. "Senator, I am not aware of the details of every security protocol." Mara opened the medical file and slid a page forward. The hospital administrator documented the arrival. Timestamps. Badge numbers. The incident triggered a medical code. The security footage exists. Mercer's mask strained. He turned slightly toward the committee members as if to regain control of narrative. "This is a politically motivated ambush against the Department of Defense." Whitaker leaned forward. "Secretary, do not lecture this committee on politics. Answer the question." Mercer sat slowly. His hands stayed visible on the table, fingers interlaced. Whitaker turned to Mara. "Doctor, why are you legally deceased?" Mara's voice stayed steady. "Because my death certificate was signed in 2009 during the debrief process." "By the debrief officer." Whitaker's eyes stayed hard. "Name the officer." Mara looked directly at Mercer. "Elias Mercer." The chamber erupted into noise. Press shouted. Cameras clicked. Whitaker struck the gavel repeatedly until the room settled into a tense hush. Mercer's face held, but his eyes flickered a brief flash of something like anger at being seen. Whitaker's voice was sharp. "Secretary Mercer, did you sign Lieutenant Quinn's death certificate?" Mercer's jaw tightened. "Senator, that was 15 years ago in a war zone. Documentation is handled by staff." Mara did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "The signature matches your current signature. The committee has the document." Whitaker's gaze moved to Price, who nodded once and placed another sealed document on the table. Mercer's eyes tracked it. The camera caught the smallest shift in his throat. Rourke spoke again, voice steady. "I was told there were no survivors. I was told the wreck was destroyed by enemy fire. I was told Lieutenant Quinn was vaporized. The shard in my spine says otherwise." Whitaker's eyes narrowed. "General, provide the committee with your flight log cache." Price spoke. "Already submitted, Senator." "Time stamped. Verified." Mercer's voice grew sharper. "Senator, those logs could be fabricated." Whitaker's stare held him. Then you welcome an independent forensic analysis. Mercer's mouth tightened. He did not speak. Mara's fingers rested lightly on the edge of the table. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips. She kept her face calm. She had lived too long pretending to be dead to let a hearing room break her. Whitaker's voice dropped controlled. Secretary Mercer, were you present in Wardak Province for an off-book operation involving contractor intermediaries? Mercer's smile returned thin. Senator, I am not going to discuss classified operations in open session. Rourke's voice cut through colder. It was not classified. It was criminal. Mercer's eyes sharpened. General, you are unwell. Rourke leaned slightly on his cane expression hard. I am in pain. That does not make me delusional. Whitaker lifted a hand, then spoke clearly into the microphone. Sergeant at Arms, please escort Secretary Mercer to a holding room. The committee will refer these materials to the Department of Justice and the FBI. Mercer's head snapped up. You cannot. Whitaker's gaze did not shift. Watch me. Two officers approached. Mercer stood, hands tightening on the table edge. For a second, the room held its breath. Mercer's voice dropped quieter, now aimed at Whitaker, like a private warning made public. You are making an enemy. Whitaker's expression did not change. I have had enemies longer than you have had power. The officers stepped closer. Mercer's shoulders sagged a fraction. Not surrender, but the recognition that the room had turned against him. He allowed himself to be escorted away, jaw-clenched eyes still trying to hold control through sheer force. As Mercer was led out, the press erupted again, louder, hungrier. Cameras tracked him. Senators whispered. Staffers moved fast phones already lit. Rourke's cane tapped once as he turned, pain flashing across his face. Mara stepped closer, her hand hovering near his elbow, not quite touching. Rourke glanced at her. Do not. Mara's voice stayed quiet. I was not helping your pride. I was helping your blood pressure. Rourke exhaled, then allowed her to steady him for 2 steps. Whitaker's gavel struck again. This hearing is adjourned. The chamber broke into motion. Security tightened around Rourke and Mara. Julian Price guided them through a side corridor as press shouted questions that did not need answers to become headlines. In the hallway, Cole, Ray, and Miles fell into position around them without speaking. The old unit moved like it remembered how. Mara kept her eyes forward. She did not let herself look back toward the chamber. She did not want the image of Mercer's face burned into her memory as a replacement for the sand and the static. They were moved into a secure room with no windows. Whitaker entered minutes later, jacket off, sleeves rolled slightly, the posture of someone who had been holding tension and finally allowed it to show. She looked at Mara first. You did not just resurrect yourself, you detonated a bomb. Mara's voice stayed flat. I did not choose the bomb. He did. Whitaker's gaze flicked to Rourke's dressing. General, you should be in a bed. Rourke's mouth tightened. I will sleep when he is in cuffs. Whitaker studied him for a beat, then nodded once, not approving, not arguing. She understood men like him. She understood the cost of waiting. Whitaker turned back to Mara. The committee is opening an official investigation. Mercer's office will fight. He has allies. Mara's eyes stayed steady. He had allies in a recovery unit too. Whitaker's expression tightened slightly. Your hospital administrator is being questioned. He is cooperating. Mara said nothing. Cooperation was another word that changed meaning under pressure. Whitaker spoke again, quieter. Doctor, you will be protected. Mara's gaze did not soften. Protection is a promise. Whitaker met her stare. So is oversight. Today you gave us leverage. Mara glanced at the hard case in Price's hands. Leverage is only useful if you keep hold of it. Whitaker nodded once. We will. Rourke's breath hitched a small wince. Mara's eyes snapped to him. Sit, Mara said. Rourke's jaw tightened. Mara's voice did not rise, but it hardened. Sit. Rourke lowered himself into a chair with controlled slowness. His face was pale again. Whitaker watched Mara's authority over him, and her expression shifted a flicker of understanding. You kept him alive. Mara's eyes stayed on Rourke's face. I am still keeping him alive. Whitaker's voice softened by a fraction. I know what it costs to carry a dead name. You did not have to do this. Mara's jaw tightened. I did. Whitaker nodded once, accepting that as truth. Later, when they finally left the Senate complex through secure corridors, the sky over Washington was washed pale. The air smelled like winter trying to arrive. Mara felt the cold in her lungs and realized she had not breathed freely in years. Rourke moved slower now, cane bearing more weight. Cole stayed near his shoulder. Ray scanned the street line. Miles kept his eyes on reflections in glass. They were driven to a safe location, then flown back under committee protection with fewer words and heavier silence. The adrenaline faded during the flight, leaving only exhaustion and the raw ache of survival. When Austin's lights appeared beneath them again, Mara felt something twist in her chest. The city looked unchanged. Bars still bright. Roads still crowded. People still living like the world was stable. On the ground, they did not go back to the hospital. They went somewhere quiet. 3 months later, the air along Lady Bird Lake was crisp. The trees had turned in patches, green bleeding into gold. Rowers cut the water in long, clean strokes, the sound of oars dipping and pulling steady as breath. Mara sat on a bench with a paper cup of coffee warming her hands. She wore a heavy coat hair down, for once the tension in her scalp eased. She watched the water and let her mind stay on the present, a skill she had never mastered until the world forced it. Footsteps approached, slow, even. Rourke came into view, moving without the cane most days now, though a stiffness remained in his shoulders. The scar at his neck had faded from angry red to a thin line. He looked older than he had in the executive wing, but softer at the edges, as if the constant war inside him had finally lost ground. He sat beside her without asking. They indicted Mercer today, he said quietly. Mara nodded once. Charges. Treason, Rourke replied. Conspiracy, embezzlement, obstruction. More coming. Mara stared at the water. She did not feel triumph. She felt an absence, like a noise that had finally stopped. Good, she said. Rourke looked at her profile. Weller, resigned. Mara's mouth tightened. Convenient. Rourke's gaze stayed on the lake. He is cooperating. He is scared. Mara's voice was flat. He should be. Rourke's hand rested on his knee fingers, relaxed. They offered me a role, consulting security, hospital systems. Mara glanced at him. You in a hospital? Rourke's mouth twitched faintly. Apparently I am comforting now. Mara's eyes held his for a beat. You are still terrifying. Rourke exhaled a low sound that might have been a laugh. I will take that as progress. They sat in silence for a moment. The water moved. The rowers passed. The city hummed on the other side of the trees. Rourke spoke again, quieter. What about you? Mara stared at her coffee cup. I took leave. Rourke nodded once, not surprised. You will go back. Mara's gaze lifted to the horizon. Maybe. I have been running on adrenaline for so long that quiet feels like a threat. Rourke's eyes softened. Quiet can be a place. Mara glanced at him. Since when do you speak like that? Rourke's mouth tightened. Since I learned what it costs when you do not. Mara looked back at the lake. The wind lifted a strand of her hair and let it fall again. I have a cabin, Rourke said, voice careful. Hill country. Not Wallace's. A different one. Smaller. It leaks a little, but it is off the road. Mara's eyes narrowed slightly. No suits. No suits, Rourke said. Mara took a slow breath. Does it have a coffee maker? Rourke's eyes warmed. It will. Mara stared at him for a long beat, then nodded once. The gesture felt small. It also felt like a door opening. Rourke's hand moved slow and cautious and rested near hers on the bench, not touching. Waiting. Mara looked at his hand. Then she placed her fingers over it. Rourke exhaled a quiet release that sounded like something finally unclenching. They sat there as the sun lowered the light, turning the water copper and gold. For the first time in 15 years, Mara did not feel the desert pressing on her skin when she closed her eyes. Rourke's voice came soft. Off duty. Mara's mouth curved into a faint smile that reached her eyes. Off duty.